Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, I see that we're recording. I'll call the meeting to order. Really just one item for me to just comment on prior to starting the agenda, and that is, as I was saying a little bit earlier informally, that it's crunch time in terms of the things that the Finance Committee has to do. I appreciate everybody's attentiveness and inputs to previous meetings while we're voting and discussions. And these are, this is the time that really counts when we're doing discussions on items that, are coming up for vote and get documented and go into the warrant report and get read to town meeting. So can be some hard work and can be some long meetings. I appreciate everybody doing that. Tonight's no different. So after tonight, there's definitely a deadline for us, and that is to provide our inputs, our synopsis on the articles that we've been assigned. And I would like to have that done and provided to Deirdre no later than Saturday, preferably by Friday. So that is the 1-2 sentence, 3 max, but I would say 2 sentences that are concise, that are clearly written, that describe the article, so that we can make the published date. This is not the motions. It's not the motions are already drafted. This is not the discussion inputs or anything like that. It's the synopsis of the articles, and typically in 2 sentences. But if it can't be done, in less than that, then you need to use your judgment. But and you certainly can reach out to those that have been on the committee perhaps for longer, or those that had the similar or same article in a previous year to get their inputs. There's no need to recreate the wheel for some of the articles. Literally, they are repeat articles for every town meeting, whether it be a revolving fund or something like that. That work has already been done. So if we need to pay mind to the fact that the public meeting, we cannot have open interchanges by email. So if somebody puts a call out, if you're the person that has the input, please don't reply to all, just do a single reply for a question. If somebody says, hey, who did the revolving fund article last year? We'll handle it that way, single responses rather than a reply to all, please. So again, article synopsis, inputs to Deirdre no later than Saturday. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, none heard. So one thing that I wanted to do is we've asked for Patty Kehoe to come back and to talk with us about her budget. And I know that there's some questions from some of the committee members. And actually, I think what we'll do, Patty, is we'll start with those questions, unless you have something. I mean, a number of us have been, a small number of us have been participating in the listening on the select board meetings and other meetings. And some of that has generated some questions or items that we want for clarification. So that's essentially why we asked you to come back tonight, and we appreciate you doing that. So I'm going to let Craig lead off.
I was not aware I was leading off. Thank you. I guess I don't have any specific questions, but I guess with COVID occurring now, and we're not going to be open probably until September at the earliest, why should we make these budget increases at this point? As a broad statement. And secondly, can you explain to us what this above level service funding is going to get us in the way of programming, targeted numbers of people served, and others? I'm going to apologize. I had my second COVID shot yesterday and I'm in the recovery mode. Okay. The headache's gone. So
to answer your questions about, maybe opening in September, I can tell you the COA has been working with the Board of Health. We've been calling Millis residents 75 plus to see if they need assistance with getting the vaccine or if they've had it. So the numbers are very high for seniors who have already had the COVID vaccine. So I'm thinking September is really a long shoot. Most of the senior centers are starting to do programming, limited programming, according to their space. They're still doing programming, but only allowing so many people in. We can continue to do that. And that's what we're looking forward to, is just offering the program. You asked about some of the programming we'd like to do. We've been working with the Permanent Building Committee for about 6 months, Bert.
More like a year.
Okay, over a year working and really detailing our programming. And we're really excited about the different programming that everybody's come up with. And we really want to start doing that. It may be on a limited basis if the town hall isn't open, but we're still seeing people by appointment only. And we can do what the other senior centers plan on doing starting next month with very limited programming, doing things that we have space for, just stuck. Right now we're doing yoga. We can have up to 10 people. And that's what we want to start doing. So program will be available.
I guess my question is specifically what types of programs are we talking about doing? I sit on the Permanent Building Committee, as you know, and we've had some discussion about that, but that's a new facility or new area for programming is years out. This is next year's budget. So what's going to happen next year that's different than this year or previous years if we increase to 40 hours a week, aside from just being open more hours? When the police came in asking for 2 new officers, we had some pretty clear explanations of what they were going to do. When the fire came in with the grant for 4 new firemen, fire personnel, they detailed responses and things like that, number of people served. I'm looking over your information now for the FY19 and 20 number of people served and stuff. Do we see an increase? Are you forecasting increases in the number of people served? What specific types of programs would you be looking at doing if we did increase this budget request to the above level service number?
What kind of program? We're looking at different crafting programs, exercise programs, supper clubs, health presentations. Millis is very health oriented. We really want to focus on that. We also want to try to attract the younger seniors with financial planning, investment clubs. We have about 3 pages of programming that we want to start, and we can still start it next year.
And I guess the question is with that younger senior set, if most of this above level service, at least when I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was extend the hours until 40 hours a week until 4 p.m. each day, pretty much. That's not going to attract somebody you classify as a younger senior, because you talk about 55 and up, and most of 55 and up I know are still working, so we can't get into a program between, that a center that closes at 4. So
we understand that, Craig. And typically what the other senior centers do is they kind of stagger. Some senior centers will let some of the workers go home early, and then you can stay late, like maybe a Wednesday night until 6, So that's what other senior centers do.
I think that those are the level of detail that I think at least I'm looking for. What would be the detailed implementation plan, not just this that talks about more hours at the center at 40 hours a week. So I'll probably have more questions later, but if somebody else would like to ask a few now, I was ready to ask questions, but I wasn't quite that ready. I apologize.
Patty, I have a question for you. Why isn't the senior center open today? In other words, I'm not that familiar. I don't know. I haven't memorized every single one of the gates that the governor or the state has required or is allowing, venues to open. And I'm certainly aware of the risk to seniors with COVID. But again, I don't know it all. What is keeping the senior center from opening, even on a limited capacity, tomorrow?
Well, we are open by appointment only. We're still doing fuel assistance applications. We're still doing podiatry, blood pressure. Um, Bert,
No, I was just gonna say that we're not open like we used to be because the building is closed and the Board of Health has said we can't do it. So in other
Well,
words,
do you know why? Like,
we
why
can't
not?
have 20 seniors come in and sit around at 8 tables and do jigsaw puzzles like they used to do, play bingo
could
like they used to do,
Could
fold the
you have,
newsletters.
could you do that up until you exceed the six, the capacity, the density of people? In other words, what could you do now that would allow you to open without reservations or without appointments, and maintain, say, the 6 foot? I mean, the schools are about to open. In fact, the schools are open. Again, there are a less category. The students are in, the students themselves are certainly in a less risk category than, say, the seniors, but not necessarily the teachers or the staff. And they're, I believe, held to 3 foot separation, is kind of the minimum, ideally 6. Have you had any dialogue with the Board of Health or whomever that would say, do these things and then you can open for programming now without appointments?
without appointments, I don't think so. Can you hear me?
A little bit.
Okay. I have talked to Mike Gazinski, and he was saying a good way to start opening is doing the limited programming, offering something, but then we have to open the door, give them temperature checks, the verbal wellness checks, but we have to also keep them distance. But it's a good way to start opening up to the senior center. Our seniors have been on lockdown for a year, and
I understand.
they really want to get out and do something.
I appreciate what you're saying. I have a family member that's lives in an assisted living home, and I'm they're definitely in a situation where they've had to have been careful, and they've quarantined everybody a number of times based on what's going on. So I've been exposed to what you're describing numerous times in the last year. I just want to understand what, given that now that there's vaccines, and I assume that if the senior population, if they've opted to take a vaccine, that most of them have had it, they've had an opportunity to get their vaccine. I think that factors into the discussion as to when you're open. I don't think this needs to wait until the fall, but again, I don't know that. So that's why I'm posing questions to you along those lines. You know better than I do.
Right. And I have been talking to other directors. We meet once every other week, and most of them are starting to open their senior centers. And I think once that starts, I think Millis will follow. But I don't think it's going to be in September. I think it's going to be sooner than we think.
All right. Thanks, Patty. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, Kathy McGinnis.
Please, Kathy, go ahead.
Could you, through the chair, could I please ask Patty, in the last year of lockdown, what's been on your plate that you're doing, Miss Patty?
Well, I've been doing all the clerical work. We've also been working with the Permanent Building Committee on the new senior center, the programming, and working with Board of Health with the vaccines. It's been a full plate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
Do we have an Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Craig.
I just closed the file. Hang on just a second. There it is. That's the one disadvantage of doing it online. When it's in front of me on a piece of paper, I make notes and don't lose it. I see in 2019, the pre-COVID year, you served 718 people, 617 last year, FY20. Actually, that'd be FY19 was 718, people, and FY20 was 619 people. And COVID was really FY21. Do you have an expected number of seniors served, a target number that you're trying to get to if we do increase this budget?
Well, right now, I was looking at numbers and I believe we're at 31%. I want to be much over that. I think over 50% would really make me happy, and I think it'd make everybody happy. And I think we can do that, Craig.
And how long do you think it would take? So I'm looking at the 2019 number, that's 2,344 seniors. And so you're looking at like 1,150, call it?
Correct. I think last year was 700 and a couple numbers.
617 is what you had in FY20.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have my numbers in front of me, but I think
That's down from 2019 by about 100 seniors.
yeah, I'm not looking at that, so I really.
Yeah, your budget submission, page 3, it looks like. So if we were to get to, because honestly, as you know, it's all cost and budget work to try to get there. And I'm just trying to figure out the benefits received, the number of people served for the cost of serving them. So basically, you'd be looking at almost doubling the number of people you served in 2020 to get to your to get to about 1,200 people.
Yeah, but looking at that 2020, Craig, half of that year, we were shut down because of COVID. So I'm looking more like at 2019 numbers and increasing those.
Just trying to think through when the shutdown occurred.
March 17th.
Can I'd like to interject a question real quick. On those numbers, are those unique seniors?
Correct.
Those are unique visits, not repeat visits, correct?
Correct. That's unduplicated.
Patty, I'm sorry. Sometimes your mic fades out.
Those are unduplicated numbers.
Okay.
That's
All right.
718 individual seniors.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was 1 quarter. Yeah. Okay. What was our total visitation last year that you had? I see the number of people, but the number of duplicated counts, you would call it, attendance, basically. I don't see that on this sheet. I'm missing it.
2020.
Or 2019. Let's use 2019 because it's a better year, obviously, as you said.
That's a more, yes. How many visits we had?
I see 718 visitors, but how many visits does that translate to? Do those people come every day? Do they come,
I can get you that number. I don't have it right in front of me. And I can't think of it off the top of my head, Craig, but I can definitely send that to you right once I get off the meeting.
Okay. Because that would be my question, how many, what's our total number of visits served also, because that makes a difference in how the budget's looked at as well.
Yeah, I could pull that up on my database.
Okay.
Patty, can you ensure that you send that number to us through the appropriate channels?
What do you mean?
The duplicate visits, can you send us that data just, by email through whomever, through Mike or, thank you. Okay. Craig, anything else?
I'm
Kathy?
good with that, I think. Yeah.
And anybody else have any questions for Patty?
I want to say, Mr. Chair, Patty reached out to me today and we had a lengthy conversation, and I was educated onto the, although I'm a senior, I'm really not ready for what's within the building. But from when my many conversation with seniors that I shared with Patty was they would like to go on luncheon trips to go outside of 02054. down in New Bedford, there's a large Portuguese meals like that, and the botanical gardens. What I'm hearing from people is that years ago these were done. And then Patty explained that you need so many people on a bus, and I won't get into everything. People say yes, and then they don't show up. So we discussed ways to, if they don't show up, they don't get their money back. That's all. But to me, that there would be more interest in the seniors if outside trips were done. And I think she agreed. And she told me that if she used those hours, in the fall or something, that she would start to look into like that for buses for that. And, so Herb wouldn't have to be driving us all around, a bunch of crazy girls around for a sandwich somewhere down on Cape Cod. But thank you, Chairman.
Okay, you're welcome. And Patty, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've been on several meetings this week as well, so we appreciate your time and candid responses. So thank you very much.
For having us. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Herb.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is our policy and operating policies and procedures draft, which essentially I'll take a motion to vote on it and adopt it. I think we're definitely at that point.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question, and it's just because I don't have my copy of it open. I did read it over. I had proposed one change in here about a supermajority, a 66% vote for amending the committee charter, so it doesn't change. It's what we do for stabilization and other things at town meeting. That was the only major difference I see. I just did not see that change. It could be because I just didn't read it carefully enough.
So somebody may certainly know better, but I think that's in section 3. But Jody, do you care to help me out there?
I do believe that was amended, but let me.
I just didn't see it as a red line. I was fixated on the red lines,
So I see section 3B. I don't see language about a supermajority.
Yeah, there it is. That sentence 2 is a vote by a majority. And I just said, I suggested a supermajority. So 6 out of
I think
9.
the best way to handle that, lacking any other comments, but we'll certainly move to a motion and further discussion, but the motion could include that proposed change. Craig doesn't have to say it right now, but it can say it during the motion.
Then I'll propose adoption of the policies and operating policies and procedures with the addition of, as written, with the addition of 3B sentence 2 saying a vote by a supermajority, 66% of the committee's members shall be required to adopt the new policy or amend the committee's policies. I don't think it'll be a sticking point, but my hope is that it just makes it a little harder to change it, like it's a little harder to spend stabilization money on a slim vote.
We're about to find out. So it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the policies and procedures document with the following change in section 3, paragraph B, second sentence, a vote by supermajority, in parentheses 66%, in parentheses of the committee's members shall be required for adoption of a new or amended committee policy. Discussion. And none heard. We'll move to a vote. We'll do a by name vote. Pete? Aye. Craig?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Jody?
Aye.
Joyce?
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Doug will abstain. The vote passes, the document passes and is now adopted. And I just want to close, I think I see your hand up there, Kathy. I just want to close by saying thank you to everybody, but especially Jody. She did a lot of work on this. I know everybody provided inputs, or a lot of us provided inputs. Thank you for that. And but again, especially Jody for doing a lot of most of the legwork on this. So thank you very much. Kathy?
You read my mind, Mr. Chair. I was just going to thank Jody. It was a
Okay.
great effort, Jody. Thanks for getting it done so quickly.
Very good.
Thanks. I'm thrilled that we have these written down now. And I hope it really helps new members coming in, as well as some of our existing members, and gets us all on the same page as to how we're going to conduct our business. I think it's a great step for us as a committee.
Right. Roger that.
Just one comment. If you would like to make a comment at any point during the meeting, I'm only viewing maybe three of you at a time. So if you raise your hand via Zoom, I don't necessarily see that. So please just interrupt me or chat, one or the other, but don't feel like because you've raised your hand that I don't intentionally skip by anybody trying to get my attention to make comments. So, okay, great. Thanks again, Jody. We're going to go back to, or move forward, but back to some town warrant article discussion. We'll try to pick up a little bit where we left off. We actually got through just about all of the articles. We did get through all of them last week. We made a decision to defer on some of them, which I have a list of. So Mike, would you kindly lead us back through those in the appropriate order? I mean, I know we deferred on articles 2 through 7, but those may not necessarily, especially considering we have a discussion upcoming on definitely something that could and likely will have budget implications on the enterprise fund discussion. So if we need to come back for that later, because it's also later in our agenda. Anyway, would you thoughtfully lead us through that and those that we still need to vote on?
Chairman?
Mr. McCaffrey, I believe.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to also recognize your creation of your rules and regulations. The select board has done the same. I'd just like to ask if we could get a copy of it. And I assume you're going to post it on the website, but I think the select board would benefit from having the policies and procedures and that you folks are following. And of course, we are more than happy to send you ours if we haven't done it already.
Yep, absolutely. We absolutely will be posting that. We'll send you the link, and we assume you'll do the same thing. Not safe to assume, but
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
certainly. You bet.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Mike.
So I think the best way for me to go through this is using the motion list that you have, which I know there were some updates that were sent out in late day today that Deirdre sent out, and I appreciate that. Sent them out. We had a few minor adjustments, and the motions as you have them also reflect the votes of the select board in relation to those articles. So I guess I would start, Mr. Chairman, with Article 1, unpaid bills, which does not change. The total is not changed, but there was one item that was inadvertently left off that list, and that's the weights and measures for an expense reimbursement of $113.77. So again, this just provides more detail, but it is the same total that you were provided earlier.
Mike, could you kindly, because every time as a practice, every time we have a meeting, I go directly to the website and I keep that open as we go, and I use the link that's there. So in this particular case, there's the warrant, the final warrant as posted. to our meeting material site. There's also the draft motions. Are you suggesting that you're going to go off of the motions or the warrant
Well, I'm
or the
going through,
list? There's a third document. There's a list. also.
I'm going through, yeah, I will only be hitting about 7 or 8 motions because everything else is unchanged.
Yep.
But I was going to go through the motions because the
Okay.
motions only show the updated language, if there is any, but they also show what the select board's recommendation is
Okay.
for that article.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to be able to follow along.
Okay. So I don't know if there's any questions on that one small change to Article 1. And again,
None
the
here.
total is still 572.91.
Okay.
The next article, Mr. Chairman, is
Real quick, anybody else have any questions on Article 1? And I'm just going to go by exception now. If you have a question, please speak up. So Article 1. Okay, proceed, Mike, and then from now on, there'll be, unless somebody speaks up, there won't be any questions.
All right, thank you. So the next item is actually a combination of Articles 3, 5, 6, and 7. There is a small downward adjustment on indirect costs to water, sewer, and stormwater. We made an adjustment today to adjust that downward based on an adjustment that was made to one of the items. So I think the total adjustment across the board is somewhere between $3,000 to $4,000, but it's about $1,000 under each category. So if you look at your old motions, you'll see that the sewer fund, the water fund, and the stormwater fund, the indirect costs have dropped by maybe $1,000 in each category. I just want to make you aware of it. If you see a discrepancy in the numbers, it's a minor change, but wanted to make note of that. So your numbers will be slightly different in Articles 3, 5, 6, and 7. So just ask you to use the updated motions that were sent to the committee this afternoon.
Okay. Well, so the elephant in the room here for me that I have to ask, because is there's been a lot of discussion on the enterprise fund and the allocation of direct and indirect costs between general fund and enterprise fund accounts. And there's been discussion in all committees, in Board of Select, the Select Board earlier in the week, the Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee earlier today, as to how to adopt, or how to fix and how to remedy the issues that have been raised. And we'll be talking about that next. But what I need to know is, when we're looking at the warrant and the budget as currently presented, as you're presenting it, what, if any, of those remedies have been documented? What of any of them have been included in these figures?
I would say the main component of change in relation to that would be the addition of a full-time heavy equipment operator laborer funded 100% through the general fund in the DPW budget. So that's an approximately $75,000 to $80,000 influx of general fund monies to offset enterprise funds where we may have some employees that are categorized as enterprise work that have been doing some general fund work. So that is the main adjustment that we have in this budget before the committee.
Okay, all right, that answers my question. That's, I understand that certainly could change, but I at least want to know where we stand with the data that we're looking at right now.
Right, and if I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the indirect costs. There have been an increase in the indirect costs this year. I can talk a little bit about the main drivers of that, and I know the finance director could touch upon that as well. But in the current fiscal year, the indirect costs to the water, sewer, and stormwater were actually reduced somewhat because of the 10% cut to some of the operations in the Veterans Memorial Building. that reduced the assessment of indirect costs for the current fiscal year to the enterprise fund. So that's being reinstated for next fiscal year. In addition to that, as part of the budget proposal, we do have an new IT person coming in, which will be 25 hours a week here. And that is also impacts the indirect costs, as well as we've had a major impact on health insurance and pension costs. We've had those costs go up about 10%. So that does also impact the indirect costs for the enterprise funds. So those are the major drivers. There are other minor items, but that's the real drivers behind the $80,000 increase in the indirect costs.
Okay. Thank you. So Article 3, as you've just described it and as written, I don't know that we're ready to vote on it yet. Or would you say that we are? Do we have all the information?
Well, I'd say you probably do have all the information you need. You would just need to make a determination on, if any changes that you're going to be recommending other than what the select board has submitted. And I would defer to Carol for any particulars in regards to that motion on the numbers. But the reason why that's been left open is because the Finance Committee has not yet decided, has not made its final vote on what will be the recommendation. So as soon as the Finance Committee determines what items will be included in their recommendation, then those numbers can be plugged in.
Okay. All right. So with that said, I'll take a motion.
On Article 3, the operating budget, Pete, is that what you're?
Yes.
I think that we need to have a good bit more discussion around the new positions and the new additions above 4% on the municipal side and the impact those might have. Because I am not 100% comfortable with the magnitude of the growth that the select board has put forward in the budget. There's a few positions. The IT position is a must fund because we are criminally, we really, it's difficult not to have an IT director. I think the exposure there is huge. So I absolutely agree with that. Do we have a list in our package of the new positions that have been included in that, the above level service, the above 4% service increase items? Is that in the meeting materials?
It's definitely in one of the links.
Yeah.
We'd have to, I think Deirdre can direct us there, perhaps, or Carol.
Look at the operating budget here, and
Is it the April 7th town administrator proposal?
Mr. Chair, I could list them. I don't know if anyone has them handy to post on your meeting, but
Mike, I think it's already posted, and it's going to be in the April 7th meeting materials. It's either going to be under the town administrator proposal or the FY22 operating budget above level service. And then there's another document called the select board recommendations of same. So it's, if everybody goes to the website, our finance committee meeting materials website under April 7th meeting materials, it's one of those three links.
so the first item that's been listed as must fund is $35,600 for the IT specialist, which is split between Millis and Norfolk. And I agree with that one personally. And the Veterans Affairs Officer, he presented in here a few weeks back, and the $6,500 seemed like small change to have that level of service continue. The DPW position, skipping to item number 4, was an attempt to address this imbalance that Carl is going to speak about between the enterprise funds and the other ones. But I'd like to have a little discussion on the other 3 positions, the executive office, select board, town administrator position, the council on aging, and the recreation. Those are the 3 that that I find are possibly not as compelling for me as the others. I don't know if you guys-
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do now. I see that Mr. Valente is here. I'm going to ask that we continue this discussion afterwards because I don't think we're going to complete what we've just endeavored to do in the next 3 minutes and keep him on track because he's here to join us. So I'm going to just kind of use my discretion and welcome Mr. Valente. I appreciate you joining us, and we're going to move to that agenda item, which is the discussion of the study on the enterprise funds analysis. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate having a few minutes on your agenda tonight to talk a little bit about the work we were asked to do by the select board on looking at the enterprise funds. I think I know a couple of you, just seeing the names on the screen, have been involved and know a little bit of the background, but I'm not sure if all of you have. So there is a short presentation I put together. If Deirdre could put that up on the screen, and I'll try to go through that relatively quickly, but most importantly, take you sort of through a high level view of what our findings have been. Good, thank you, Deirdre.
You're welcome.
So the project history actually goes back well over a year ago when we were asked by the select board and by the town administrator to come in and do a full review of the Public Works Department and their operations. And that report was delivered to the select board in March of 2020. One aspect of the report back then, and what I'm here to talk to you about tonight, was we were asked to look closely at the 3 enterprise funds that the town operates. And if the charges or the revenues that were being collected for those funds, if those were covering the cost, more than the cost, or sort of where that all fell out. And we received that question. We did, I don't know, well over a dozen interviews as part of our work. And I think everybody we interviewed asked the same question. Are the enterprise funds being operated correctly from a finance point of view? Unfortunately, and Deirdre, you could go to the next slide. We couldn't answer that question of whether the direct and indirect costs were reasonable because there was very limited documentation of the methodology that was used for establishing the cost for the 3 enterprise funds. And the current staff, the town administrator and the DPW director and finance director, none of them were involved in the development of that methodology. So unfortunately, at that time, we said, we can't answer the question whether the costs are approaching what they should be, and we recommended a complete revision of the methodology. So that was March of 2020. So sort of fast forward to today, the selectmen and the town administrator asked us to come back and said, okay, you made the recommendation back then. Do we need to redo the methodology? They asked us if we would do that, and that's what we've been working on for about the last 3 months, working with town staff. We started from scratch. We didn't try to recreate the existing methodology. Not to say that it didn't have some value, but we felt that we would rather just start from scratch and come up with a methodology for looking at the direct and indirect costs, and then have the town vet that methodology, see if they agree with the approach we were taking. And when I say the town, I'm not exactly sure who that will be, whether it will be representatives from the finance committee, representatives from the enterprise fund Advisory Committee. We have gone over it with town staff. And I have presented it to the Board of Selectmen, but not in a lot of detail. I've, again, given them sort of a high level view of what we found. So let me sort of take you through that, and Deirdre, you can go to the next slide, the table, the Excel table. So, and I'm gonna sort of work from the bottom up on this. So the bottom half of the chart are the indirect costs, our analysis of the indirect costs. And the way we define indirect costs are those that are typically in the general fund, but they are costs or expenses that can be attributable to the enterprise fund. So in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, indirect costs appear in the general fund. And as you've been doing for a number of years, correctly so, then the general fund is reimbursed for incurring those costs from by the enterprise fund. So that's the bottom half of the chart. And the top half of the chart are the direct costs. And in our case, we set it up as the compensation or salary costs, expenses, debt service, your assessment for the Charles River Water Pollution Control District in the case of sewer. So that's the top half of the chart. So just by sort of way of a map, that's what you're looking at. And this summary table is backed up by a number of different other tables, which lays out the methodology we used. And this is all, we did this analysis assuming we were doing this for fiscal 21, so the fiscal year that we're operating in now. So what did we find when we did this? So again, starting from the bottom up, overall, we found that your direct and indirect costs are, for the case of water, about $106,000 less than you've budgeted for. So you're budgeting about 1.95 million for water, direct and indirect. Our analysis, we came up with about 1.84 million for water. So you're about 6% over what you've budgeted. In the case of sewer, the percentage difference is again a little greater, closer to 11%, or about $164,000 that you budgeted more than it's actually costing you to run that operation, the sewer operation. And then your newest enterprise fund, and I guess this isn't surprising because you're really sort of getting your feet wet on the stormwater enterprise fund. The numbers are smaller, about 110,000, but percentage wise, it's about 19% of your expenses are below what you've actually budgeted. And again, it has two pieces to it. It has the indirect cost. So the indirect cost, the way we calculate the indirect cost, you're actually pretty close. And I'm looking at rows 24 and 25. So 24 is what we calculated your indirect cost should be, and row 25 is what you budgeted, or what the general fund has been reimbursed by the enterprise fund. So those actually aren't far off. On the direct costs, again, the differences are greater. And here we're looking at, in terms of the difference, row 5 is the difference between what you've budgeted and what you're actually incurring in direct costs. And when I presented this to both the selectmen and the enterprise fund advisory committee, that's what I pointed out. I said, the indirect costs are actually pretty good. The direct costs are farther off. And as I gave that some more thought and talked with the selectmen and town administrator about it, I'm actually going to sort of correct myself there because I made a change in the methodology from what you are currently doing. So the bottom line doesn't change. The percentages in row 30, those don't change, but I use as an indirect cost, row 18, indirect DPW administration. I consider that an indirect cost. And that's the cost of the director, the administrative assistant, and then there's a part-time administrative staff person there. So you can see in the case of water, about $71,000. The town has always budgeted that as a direct cost. So if you were to move that 71,000 from the bottom half of the chart, the indirect cost, up to the top half of the chart, to direct cost, in that case, your direct costs are pretty close to being what you budgeted. And the indirect costs are further away. So it's again a methodology issue, and I'm happy to whoever I'm going to sort of ask to help vet this so that the selectmen eventually can take a position on the methodology. We should just reach a conclusion on how you want the indirect DPW cost row 18 presented. But I just want to sort of point that out, that again, the town has been using a slightly different methodology in terms of those what I call indirect DPW administration. You've always included that, and you continue to budget that as a direct cost. For my own reasons, I don't do it that way. It's not to say it's one way is right or wrong, but it does make, depending on which way you do it, it either makes the indirect costs look good or not look as good, or the direct costs look pretty good, pretty accurate, or the way I present it, not quite as accurate. But the bottom line doesn't change. There's a couple of pieces of this analysis that are yet to be finalized, which is why we label this preliminary data. So we have looked at, in terms of row 4, compensation, which is based on work hour analysis. So this is a terrific piece of analysis that both Dave Ramachi, your foreman, and Deirdre have been working on, where they've been tracking the laborers' time, so the DPW staff, on an hourly basis, sort of how their time is assigned to each of your cost centers, your 5 cost centers. So your 5 cost centers are your 3 enterprise fund, your general fund or highway, and then the transfer station. That's what we consider your 5 cost centers. So they've been tracking this since last February, which was one of our recommendations in our report, and they've been doing a terrific job tracking that data. So, but right now that's based on total hours, and what I will recommend is a little bit more precise way of tracking that compensation, that we'll just fine tune that number a little bit more. But so there's a little bit more work to be done on row 4. And then on row 17 on auto insurance, you can see the numbers there are very small. I had a little bit of trouble matching up the town's insurance list from Maya, your insurer, to what's on the DPW list of vehicles. They didn't match up quite, so that needs a little bit more work. Again, it won't have a dramatic impact on the bottom line, but that's why row 17 is highlighted. So from sort of a high level perspective, that this table is sort of what we came up with based on fiscal 21 data. And then Deirdre, if you can go to the last slide. What we would suggest as next steps. So first, to complete the analysis, and both on that sort of more precise work on the compensation, and particularly around the licenses that the town pays extra compensation for water licenses, for sewer license, and then there's one other license that's used for both stormwater and highway. That doesn't need a lot of work, but that needs a little bit more work to just get the precision a little bit more accurate. We want to vet this methodology that we came up with somebody from the town. So although I feel pretty strongly that it's defendable, if the selectmen are going to vote at some point to adopt this methodology, I think they would benefit from, whether it's the finance committee or the enterprise fund advisory committee, somebody saying, we went through all the details, we agree with it, or if there's things that you find that you don't agree with, and I agree. I mean, if I say, yeah, I missed that, or I didn't understand something correctly, I'll make the change. But since the select board, I think at some point would really like to adopt this methodology going forward, then it needs to be vetted by somebody who can advise the Board of Selectmen that the methodology is reasonable. Number 4 is an important point for, I think, everybody to consider. This methodology is based on 1 year of data. And it's only in terms of salary, although we had 12 months of salary data, we only used 9 months of it, because 3 of the months were the COVID months when staff was not, DPW staff was sort of in a week and then not working a week. And so we decided that those 3 months just weren't representative of everything. But the whole year, as everybody in this room knows, was a COVID year. And so I'm a little bit troubled in terms of saying, although I think the methodology is a decent methodology and is defendable, I'm not convinced myself that the data, based on just 1 year of data, is a sound way of sort of saying, okay, the end results mean we have to do some truing up. I think what we recommended a year ago, and what I'm still recommending, is we think you should at some point, work off of 3 years of a rolling average. At a minimum, undertake this analysis again using fiscal 22 data. So, sometime this summer when the books are closed, do the analysis for fiscal 22. So you have a second data point. And I think that will tell us a lot about sort of, are the bottom lines representative of what we think they are. And eventually we hope that we are able to get you, or that you would agree to use sort of 3 years of data, and then always use a rolling average as you set your rates. So certainly do you need a second data point, and with a goal of a 3-year average. And then eventually, if there's some adjusting that needs to be done to the enterprise fund rates, you sort of work to making whatever adjustments may be necessary and appropriate. But I'm certainly comfortable saying, just based on 1 year of data, now's not the time to say, yes, even if you agree with the methodology, I'm not comfortable enough with just 1 year of data, which is only 9 months of salary information, that, we extrapolated to 12 months, but it's only based on 9 months, that's a good enough, that's a single data point. So I think, the selectmen were asking the right questions. They sort of said, we're not sure that our methodology is appropriate, so we'd like to revisit it. So I think the board did the right thing. Like we do in government, when we find something, we tell everybody about what we found in an analysis. So, this is now my 3rd committee meeting that I presented this to. And I learned something every time I do this from the questions I receive from the different committees. So I appreciate sort of having the opportunity to do that. But I also hope that at some point, whoever the appropriate either board or person is, I can and sit down with that person or persons and really take you through the nitty gritty detail on the methodology, to have another set of eyes look at this. So, Mr. Chairman, I know I went through that quickly, but hopefully that covers the high points, and I'm available to stay for questions for as much time as you need me.
Okay. I appreciate you doing that. It was thorough and it was not overly quick at all. So thank you very much. I do have a couple questions, and I've, before I mention those questions, this has been discussed in several other meetings, select board meetings, the Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee meetings, obviously, is the main place where this has been discussed. And so I have been privy to those. I would like for you to comment on whether it's safe to say that additional fidelity based on using 2 or 3 years data, that extra data is not going to cause $387,000 in misallocation to evaporate. It's not going to go to zero. There is a problem and it needs to be fixed. Would you agree with that?
That's what my gut tells me. But I'm also a data person, but I think in general, yes, I would agree with it, but I like to have data to back up answers. And again, unfortunately, I can't tell you anything more than what these, this data set, this limited data set tells us.
Right. And I'm sorry, it's kind of an obvious question, but I do feel compelled to ask it. And so the other question I have is that based on your experience, and it may be none based on where, what the rest of my question is, the context, but based on your experience where towns have had allocation issues with between their enterprise and their general funds, how have you seen them address those issues? We assume, maybe we shouldn't, but we assume that there's no malfeasance here. This is just an error or a shortcoming in the previous methodology, the assumptions, the estimates that have been made. That's, as far as I know, that's what's happening here. We're seeking to improve our methodology. But when a town has an opportunity to improve on its methodology, how does that happen? Should it be done immediately? Should it be spread out? Should it be has there been look back in other towns? What is, in your experience, what have you seen?
So I can only speak to the 3 towns that I worked in when I was town manager in those communities, of which in each case they were had 2 enterprise funds, didn't have a stormwater fund, and we sort of found that there needed to be some truing up done. And my last community I worked when the difference was the largest, and I don't remember now how, what that magnitude was, but it was the most significant. And in our case, we presented it to the selectmen, and then we presented some options to the board, to the select board, for sort of doing that truing up. And that so far that has not been part of my scope of work, and if it is, I'd be happy to help the town in the future of coming up with those options. In my last community where the difference was the largest, the select board ended up adopting a recommendation that we did the truing up over a 3-year period. It so happened that we were able to do sort of, I'll call front loading it, sort of make the largest adjustment in the first of the 3 years. But it wasn't something that, that happened in 1 year. It just wasn't practical. But I can't say, what would make sense in Millis. But I think, it would be helpful to sort of go to the board and say, here are your options, and let the board, deliberate over the different options before making a decision.
Sure.
The
Okay, well, that's-
other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I could just
Please.
add, we really don't know this methodology, the existing methodology. It very well could have been spot on when it was developed, years and years ago. And it may be just over time, because it wasn't maintained, that it sort of grew apart, so to speak. So, there's no evidence one way or another that the existing methodology wasn't sound at the time, but there was evidence in our interviews that the methodology wasn't maintained. It was just incrementally added to every year. The indirect costs were incrementally added to, the direct costs were sort of made these adjustments. So I didn't want my comments to be taken as, your current methodology has been flawed since the beginning of time. There's no way that we didn't look into that, and there's no way we would know if that was the case or not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Craig, I see you with the hand up, and I'm going to go to you next. I just want everybody to focus their comments and discussion on Mr. Valente's presentation. And as soon as that discussion's over, I'm going to ask Kathy McGinnis to speak as chair of the Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee and go over any comments or material that she'd like to discuss. So go ahead, Craig.
Okay, I'll try to stay within those constraints, I think. But my first question is—
It's hard to do.
I know. My first question is, we have a new building coming on with the debt being divided across three of the different areas: general fund, water, and sewer. Will that dramatically change this allocation? Because I know that when the rates were built originally, at one point those were factored in as rate. I believe they're factored in as part of the rates. So do you think, so that would come in your direct cost allocation, I guess? And that would tend to true this up, if I read this correctly. I've seen this 3 times, so I'm getting my question down now.
So you're correct. It would probably be part of the direct costs under row 9, debt service. And I know that the town has come up, prior to our coming on board and working on this, had come up with an allocation for the building and how that would be. So it's currently, and I'm sure the debt service costs in fiscal 21 were very small, because I know that, you just started work on that building.
Yeah.
So you probably only have, an interest cost. So, but that's where it would be show up as we go into 22 and 23 is in row 9.
And then the other question is, in terms of adjusting this, and this is where I'm trying to stay within our chair's parameters, but we have a position that is going to be 100% general fund funded. That would free up staff to work in the enterprise, in our budget proposal. And theoretically, that frees up staff to work in the enterprise funds. Is that a way to address this? Is that type of funding mechanism a tool that can be used?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was. After being through it 3 times, I'm starting to follow. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Anybody else from the committee or from the audience that has questions for Mr. Valente or on specific to his presentation?
Am I unmuted?
You
Yes,
are.
you are.
Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Kathy.
Oh,
Go ahead,
if the
Kathy.
chair recognizes me, Joyce.
I certainly do.
Thank you. Thank you. A few things. I don't want us, the FinCom, to put Mr. Valente in the unfair position to state a legal opinion as to whether or not he has seen other towns do this. I think this is an answer for Mr. Chair, and it gets above what FinCom has done before. This is something town council should look at. This is something that the Department of Revenue is currently looking at. And we all agree on the enterprise committee that the funds were originally divided out 2008 when it started, as they should be, but they were able to get in some more funds, more. It grew apart, like he said. The seams are ripping. How long? And I asked this to Mr. Valente, maybe he knows. When you say that you need 2 more years of analysis, does that mean that the enterprise fund taxpayers are going to be required to fund general government for 2 more years until you feel safe in saying what you said in your chart? You explained your chart was defendable, but as an analysis person, you like more than 1 year to defend it. And I wanted to ask, how long ago, Mr. Valente, do you know, did the DPW and Deirdre Gilmore start dividing the hours apart like what you took over? How many years prior had they done that?
Well, they had been doing it for a number of years, but they were doing it in half-day increments. And we just did not feel that was a reasonable or precise enough approach. So when we were doing our field work over a year ago, one of our recommendations, if you look back at the report, was they need to do it in hourly increments. And they adopted it right away. I mean, nobody disagreed with it. And so the foreman, Dave Ramachi, started that process the 1st of February. I want to say the 1st of February. I have to double check, but I believe it was the 1st of February. And then we then had 12 months of data by the time I came back, from February of 20 to the end of January 21. That was done on an hour by hour basis, based on, again, Dave's tracking, and then Deirdre's doing all the sort of the compiling of that data.
That's a good point, Mr. Valente. Thank you. But did I've heard you 3 times like many, and it almost takes 3 times before it sinks in for me. But did I hear you state that the figures that Dave Ramachi, the general superintendent, and Miss Deirdre came up were pretty much in, even though they were half-day increments, Carl, they pretty much were in line with your figures of the last year?
If you handle, yes, I guess the short answer to your question, yes. If you put what I consider as an indirect cost on the bottom half of the chart, if you put that in the top half of the part, the way the town has been doing it, then the direct costs are pretty close, but the indirect costs are off, right? So I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes, you are.
All right,
Yes,
good.
you are. I'd just like to state that, you have and Chairman Pete, I'm sorry but you have a superintendent who's trying to keep hours and meanwhile direct his staff to do the chores for the day. So I would give Dave Ramachi a little leeway in his and include those few years that they did in the technical analysis that either the board wants or the FinCom wants, because the Sewer Enterprise Committee is certainly, we've seen the data, and it's pretty darn close, Mr. Valente, for a couple of people that, I mean, Deirdre's got a finance degree, I get it, but when you know where I'm coming from. And do you think if you want your 3 years, Mr. Valente, would you be satisfied in telling the enterprise ratepayers? And again, this is how it would be if you wanted another few years, Chairman Pete, that the 3 enterprise ratepayers would continue to pay overage. Would we get an IOU
I'm going to
or
interject,
something, Pete?
Kathy, I'm going to interject real quick, because so I'm clear, the reason that I asked my first question about the fidelity, that the change in that number, whether it's 387 right now, getting another 2 years of data is not going to significantly change the allocation that needs to be fixed. So I know that one of the proposals is to make adjustments heavily as much as we can this fiscal year for FY22. Makes perfect sense to me. There's still another $200,000 plus after that, plus over the next 2 to 3 years, you know, after FY22. So I don't think, I mean, I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I don't think we're waiting for 3 years to start chipping away at the allocation correction that needs to be made. I'm certainly not taking that opinion. I don't know who is.
Thank you, Pete. Maybe you know, the only word I know about Fidelity is the investment company. I just, you know, sometimes I don't understand, which is all right.
Accuracy.
I know what you mean, but you could take a vote now and everyone on the FinCom would agree that something has to be done, but it means nothing. We're not the bottom line unless we vote not to, you know what I'm saying? Unless we vote not to fund the operating or whatever. But I don't see, I have not been informed by the select board on anything regarding that they sense the urgency and the payback to the citizens. You know, let me see, there's 2,700 residences, 78% get town water, 44%, 1,535 use town sewer, and a staggering 3,028 residents, 87% pay into the stormwater. There being a total of 3,455 real estate taxes that go out of town. And I've provided you with that information. These are people that want a refund. They don't want it after 3 years. This is the testimony and the evidence that the Enterprise Advisory Committee received.
Okay.
I can't support anything for 3 years, Pete. I'm sorry.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Valente? I think Joyce, you had one.
Yeah, I just want, I don't know if this is a correct question to ask you, sir. And if I'm not in line, please let me know, but it's, from what I'm understanding, we're not using the funds the way we're supposed to be using them. That the purpose is different than how we're using them. Am I correct in that question? Or am I putting you in an uncomfortable position?
Well, you're not putting it, what, I guess the way I would characterize it is it appears from this 9 months of data, what appears is that the enterprise funds are paying for work or covering the costs of activities which are more general fund activities. So if that's, maybe it's a different way of saying or answering your question or saying what you just said, but there are costs that are being assumed by the enterprise fund, which the work that's being done is not enterprise fund work, it's general fund work.
So how do we rectify that as far as the funds? Do we, I mean, is that a board? I don't know who I'm asking this question. It might be Mike, it might be Pete, it might be Carl, Craig, any one of you. How do we then correct the problem? I think it's a problem. Where do the funds, how do we transfer those expenses to the appropriate funds so that the enterprise funds are not being tapped into inappropriately?
Joyce, let me try to answer that just kind of with some clarity, because I know where you're coming from.
Thank you.
The issue here is that there are employees that work for the town, that their labor, their effort, their direct labor is split. It's split between work on, say, the water enterprise and the general fund, which is highways or transfer. And so that work proportion between, say, the water enterprise and the general highway fund is estimated. Previously it had been estimated, and that resulted in, and the way that happens, the way that shows up in the budget is the enterprise reimburses the general fund for those labor hours. And there's also indirect costs, which Mr. Valente went over as well. Correct. And so if you're not accounting and tracking those labor hours, for instance, then it could result in the general fund, excuse me, the enterprise fund reimbursing the general fund too much money. So that somebody that's spending, say, a 60-40, 60% of their time on the water and 40% of time in the general cost center, the general fund cost center, if it's 60-40 estimated, but they're actually only doing, say, 50-50, then it's a 10% overcharge or over reimbursement by the enterprise fund to the general fund. And so what has to happen at some point in time, and that's really I think the crux of the debate, which we're going to have, is when do you correct that allocation? Do you correct it all 300,000 of it now? Do you spend a year or two doing it? We'll have that debate later, and I don't want to have it right at this very moment, but I did want to address your question because it's not an out of line question at all. We all have to understand this in order to have the discussion and be able to make our recommendation. So it's a good question. I hope I did it justice by explaining it.
You
I apologize if I didn't.
No, you did. And thank you. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate or not, but it's just something that it's like, ugh. We want to make sure that everything's being used appropriately. Any monies that we have are being used properly. I wouldn't want any taxpayers to turn around and sue the town because they thought we were using the funds inappropriately. So,
Go ahead.
you know, it's that whole transparency thing. So thank you.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm a bottom line kind of person. Is it as simple, and I'm saying this on a piece of paper simple, not actually moving money and the implications of it, as simple as reducing the enterprise budgets and increasing the DPW budgets by that amount. Now I realize it throws the budget all out of whack because I do budgets for a living. But I mean, is that the solution we're talking about? We're talking about basically reducing the amount of the enterprise funds budget and increasing the DPW budget to cover those direct costs that the workers are working there, putting aside any ramifications that may have on operations. And Mike, I guess that's a question to you.
Craig, that's certainly how I see it, but if anybody sees it differently, please opine.
That's where I got to, but I want to hear the town manager opine on that and see if I was wrong.
I mean, that's essentially correct. I would certainly say that the only way to rectify that really is through additional general fund monies into the department, and whether that's through additional staff funded through the general fund, or whether that's through just changing the funding source from the enterprises to the general fund. That is essentially it. And I think it was a question of whether or not the town is taking any action this coming fiscal year, and certainly the addition of a full-time heavy equipment operator funded by the general fund is an $80,000 step in that direction. And the question remains, if the finance committee believes that more should be done, then cuts would have to happen elsewhere in the budget. So that's pretty much the bottom line.
Okay. Thank you. I had a question that I wanted to put out there. I'm going to actually direct it to Mr. McKay. I see him online. He doesn't necessarily have to answer it, but I've at least planted the seed by asking it. And that is, does the going forward as the new methodology is developed, and maybe that does take more time, but does the water maintenance contract affect the allocation of direct labor? Is there any general fund / water enterprise allocation of resources that would be affected by that contract? Jim, if you would comment or just say, we'll see.
No, I think I get your question. You talk about the tank, the $1 million tank assessment.
Yes.
That would just be fully under the water enterprise allocations.
Right, but is there anything that the general fund employees currently do now that are allocated to general fund that they wouldn't be doing once that contract takes place?
No, because right now the enterprise water fund people maintain the general vicinity. They inspect the tanks on a monthly basis. They check it out daily. So
Yep.
there'd be nothing with the general fund. They have nothing to do with that system.
Okay. All right. That's fine. As Mr. Valenti said, this may have been a great methodology back when it was initiated, but over time, conditions change and cause assumptions to not necessarily be accurate and do a disservice or make things less accurate. And that's obviously a big change for us recently. So, okay. Any other questions regarding Mr. Valente's presentation? Okay, I'm going to ask that Kathy, if you would please speak as the chair of the Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee and just give us an update on your meeting tonight or anything else, please, and just let us know what the committee recommends.
Okay, I feel like Craig Schultz being asked point blank things. Let me just, Craig was there. We prepared a recommendations to the, without actual motions to the, oh shoot, I don't know where it is now.
We voted 3 motions, Kathy, I
That's
think.
right. You want to
We
brief
wanted-
us on it? Let me, while I find it.
I actually have my notes open, but they're cryptic.
Oh.
But I have some notes in front of me. The first motion was to get a legal opinion to find out the town's exposure for this, to find out if we do have a retroactive issue and if the town the town council believes that we should, that we have any exposure that needs to be addressed immediately. The second one was to get a breakdown, which exists in the budget already, but we just wanted it a little more concisely, of how the staff are allocated. And the third one, and Carl, pay attention to this one, was to request that the selectmen engage Carl for a bit more work on this project. So those were the 3 recommendations we made. Beyond that, we also had a long discussion about funding this over 2 or 3 budget cycles, not years, this being budget cycle number 1, and then the next 2 budget cycles after this. So it would be done in a 3 budget year period, not a 3 fiscal, not going to next year, which addresses Pete's view. I think everybody on the enterprise committee was of the opinion that these numbers aren't going to vary by a magnitude that if we did a large adjustment this year, it would be over adjusted. We think if this is off by $50,000 or $60,000, too high of a number, it's still a lot of money and it still can be addressed in a large chunk this year if the money is available. And we felt that the new position was a great start to that. And then, look at it again next year with more data after we get the debt service in and the other items in that are going to hit. And then make another adjustment, and then any final true up in the third year that we would have when we have all the final numbers. But that would get us there quicker than delaying everything for 1 year. We thought the selectmen had a good start to it with the position they proposed. But we had some specific requests on other ones, and we can get to those during our budget discussion. But
Right.
that was
Craig,
ours.
let me just ask that we requested town council a written opinion rather than verbal so that we could read it. And also let me stress, Chairman Pete, that in what member Pete Germain talked about, we were making recommendations, we were advising, we are not insisting or demanding. And the language that we used was Mr. Gudzinski totally agreed with it, and so did Pete Germain. So don't let anybody here tonight listening is that, do this or else. It was regarding those 3 matters. Thanks a lot too, Craig.
I just happened to have that page open.
I found it. It was under my sandwich.
I ate between the 2 meetings.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. McCaffrey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the input from everyone as well. Mr. Valenti, we appreciate your efforts. Just to give you a couple of pointers, the proposal from Community Paradigm to complete the work, if you will, has been received by Town Administrator's Office. So that will be subject to a select board, the next select board meeting. Can't speak for the board because we haven't voted on it, but I certainly feel as though there's a high degree of likelihood that the board will review that and probably give it the green light, because I think the work is been high quality work and it's moving along, and it would be probably bad to try and, I mean, I think the consistency of the team working on it is important to the town as well. And I just think as though I have my own views about the accuracy of the numbers. I'm concerned about not only absolute amount year over year, but consistency year over year. So that if one year, for some reason, the numbers go down and they come back up, I don't want to be moving the budget every year based upon a single year's information. But I think that, you know, we clearly see here that there's work to be done. And assuming that the finance committee and the board works together, if we have a funding issue or funding item we want to address this year, not only do we have to say, okay, there's enough information that we think we should do something, but we have to have a source for the money. And at this point, clearly, if we're going to move in some of this into out of the enterprise, if you will, and into the general fund, we need to have a source of funding. So that comes back to the position, and that also, but that's not going to be enough, I guess, is my concern. And the last thing I would say, though, is if we reallocate people and we take work away from the folks in the enterprise, is there work for them to do in the enterprise? Because that's not totally clear to me that if you, what additional work could we do? Could we accomplish? And that's a question that I'd like to see addressed, because if you go back to the responsibility of the select board as the water and sewer commissioners, it's not only the cost, but then how do we charge the ratepayers? And we want to make sure that we have people fully deployed who are doing the work that we need to get done.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, this was
ahead,
Kathy.
Kathy.
This was totally discussed at the Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee meeting held at 5 p.m. And Jim McKay came up with a plethora of work that is not being done, that wink, wink, the state almost requires you to do. And Jim can address that if you would like to, Mr. McKay.
Well, I heard Jim go through it, and so, yep. Jim, would you please discuss it? I know what you're going to say, or I've heard you say it, but now's just as an appropriate place to say it in this meeting as well. So go right ahead.
Just briefly, I've reported this to every select board meeting that I've ever been at during a budget presentation of the workload that needs to be done in the water department. So for it to come out tonight that's we're not sure if there's not enough work being done in the water.
Mr. Chairman, that maybe that was a misunderstanding of what I had to say here. Okay.
Hold on.
I think it's the obligation.
Mr. McCaffrey, hold on one second, please.
Yeah, okay. I mean, but, all right.
Hold on one second. Jim, would you kindly just go through the list of work that you discussed earlier?
Sure. Every water department needs to do exercise valves. There's several thousand valves in the town of Millis that have never been operated once in the time that I've been here. And with people that I know have been here before, because of the lack of the ability of the water, mainly water department, to do that. We have 13 outside buildings that are maintained by the water and sewer division with lift stations, and they're all buildings that need to be painted, maintained, grass cut, repaired, doors, stuff like that. We have a flushing program that we paid, tens of thousands of dollars for the study to be done, and we just don't have the staff and time to do it. So we would implement that also. That's just a couple of things. And we would operate a water and sewer department like most surrounding towns do that have never been able to do that because of the workload that the general fund is being put on the enterprise funds.
I just want to thank you, Mr. McKay. I just wanted to maybe add a little additional background, something that that I understand through some of my past experience, and that is that there's always different cost centers that only warrant through their work study, a partial full-time equivalent of some sort of craftsman, whether it be a carpenter, a plumber, equipment operator, that don't necessarily warrant a full body, a full-time equivalent for a year. And so the efficient way to provide those services to the town is to essentially do what we're doing. This is not a novel concept. And somebody may say, well, why is it so complicated? Well, it's complicated because when you only need a portion of one, but you need another portion of one elsewhere within the cost centers across the town, you hire one and you allocate their costs, and hopefully accurately. And that's why these issues come up. As Jim McKay described, if that division of labor and that work and the demand on those budgets, that can happen, but it doesn't alleviate you from having to account for it properly or accurately. So that's why this, in my opinion, this is not uncommon of an issue to arise, but it still has to be taken care of. But that's why some of the work may not get done, and why it could get done if the costs were allocated properly, and you add resources to the general fund via addition of an equipment operator for the general fund, so that those available labor hours can go back to where they were intended. Mr. McCaffrey, I cut you off earlier.
Oh, you're muted.
Myself. There we go. Yes. Yeah, I want to apologize for sounding antagonistic, because that's not my intent. I think that the conversation here has been outstanding and excellent. I think it's very instructive. I think you will find that the select board is completely in support of this direction. We need to understand as a board, not only as the water and sewer commissioners, but as the select board, and I think FinCom shares in that accountability for the transition plan. And the transition plan meaning we need to, if the answer to this is add general fund staff to remove the work that is being performed by the staff that is dedicated to water, that has all the skills and licenses and whatever, to me, that is a reasonable solution. And that was also included in the paradigm report, which indicated that when they looked at the DPW, that the DPW workforce we have is understaffed. And so the board accepted that, felt that we needed to move forward with that. And I think that we should continue to do that too, to the extent particularly that we can find the funds available, because what we're all trying to do is allocate scarce resources. So I think the conversation tonight, I appreciate it. I think the board has every intention of continuing this dialogue and conversation. We've asked the Enterprise Committee to advise us, and we're certainly going to welcome them to the next meeting so we can continue this conversation. And the question that we have as a town for today, in the next 3 weeks, is how are we going to present the budget to take into account this issue as well as all the other issues that we face. So that's going to come to allocation of additional above level service requests, one of which led, of course, from the select board's point of view, to the request for the additional staff member for the DPW. But that I would like to just caveat that with saying, based upon the staffing model that was recommended to us, that's going to still be insufficient. We're going to need to plan as a community for adding additional staff to the DPW so that they can do their job.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I'd
Go ahead,
like
Kathy,
to
and we're
say,
gonna, just so
Okay.
everybody's
Yeah,
aware.
why don't we
we're
say
gonna-
goodbye to Carl?
Well, what I was gonna say is we're gonna wrap up this agenda item. We're running over. So Kathy, you, unless somebody strenuously objects to that, Kathy, you're gonna have the last word.
I'm not seriously addressing this, driving me crazy. Carl, were you in Medfield or Needham when I worked for the YMCA's 20 years ago? I don't know which town it was.
Craig, you're out of order. Kathy had the floor.
Before you go.
Yeah, I know, you can make a date. I would just like to say that, where do you come up with the money for this, FinCom members? You find out where the $378,000 went to last year that was given to above level employees and hirings. And you start with there and you go back the year before that and you go back the year before that and you correct it sooner rather than later and admit it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we will move on.
Craig?
Carl, you were muted. Medfield or Needham? I know we did business 20 years ago.
It was Needham, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I needed.
All right, Mr. Valente, I want to thank you for giving your third encore presentation or second encore presentation to one of the several committees that are concerned with this. And I'm sure we'll be talking with you in the future. So thank you
Great,
for bearing with us.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for having me. Good night.
You
Goodbye.
bet.
Thanks, Carl.
Yep. So
Okay.
long.
All right, I think that gets us back to warrant article discussion. Mike, we left off on Article 3. And we were discussing above level service requests. I'm actually going to go to the document on the meeting materials, the select board, their recommended additions.
Did the finance committee members have any specific questions about the items that are on that list?
Well, okay, I do. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that these must funds are must funds. I certainly see them as worthy. I'm not a proponent of increasing the Council on Aging by the full hours requested. I see it as a, I'm not ready to make that leap to the full amount requested, especially as I see where that's additional budget resources that could be applied to the issue we've just been talking about. And I think every budget dollar has the potential to be a candidate for, getting to a point where we're back in balance between the allocation of where it should be. So the select board. So I asked you earlier, which of the presentations, which of the items are included in the warrant? So I assume that the top 5 must funds are included there.
Right.
Michael?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I believe the first item is labeled must fund. The other 5 are priority ranked, but I think they're all included. Am I correct?
Oh.
That's correct.
Okay, thank
correct.
you. Thank you for, yeah, I agree.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, all 6 items are included in the select board's recommended budget.
But the IT one is a must do.
Well, we've already committed to the IT one,
Right.
and that town meeting approved the funding in the fall, and we've signed an agreement with the town of Norfolk to share an IT person, and we actually have in the current process of recruiting for that position.
Okay, so really our options here as the finance committee is to vote on the article as written. Again, Article 3. Article 4. So and forgive me because I'm not quite as familiar as I should be. Article 2, Mike, what's the difference between Article 2 and Article 3?
Well, Article 2, Mr. Chairman, that's That's the transfers within this fiscal year.
Okay, so now what's the difference between Article 3? So Article 3 is the operating budget. Thank you very much.
correct.
So you've set me straight. So Article 3 essentially is the operating budget, and if so, our options are to adopt the above level service requests as presented in that document that has, and just in the event that not everybody's looking at it, but it has the IT specialist as a must pay for 35,600. It's got increased the veteran service officer stipend, roughly $6,500. Department assistant for the select board town administrator. That's additional hours that was discussed with us for 21,000. Additional hours in the council on aging for 48,000. A heavy equipment operator, laborer for 52,000. And the department assistant for the recreation department for close to $12,000. So our options are to vote that as is, or we can vote in a motion with alternatives to that. And I think that's where we are in our discussion. And I'd like to have the discussion now, at least a preliminary discussion now, prior to having a motion made. If somebody's feels like the motion, the motion should read as is with those items as is, then fine, we can take a motion. But if there's going to be anything changes to that, let's at least have a preliminary dialogue now.
Mr. Chairman? Could I just,
Mr. McCaffrey.
yes, I just want to say that our intention of presenting the budget the way we did was in fact to call attention to, we included it in the budget, but we wanted to call attention to the above level service items, which you just went over. So we intended that for consideration by the finance committee. And obviously, if there's concerns or issues or you don't support it, the select board will then make whatever adjustments we would have to make so we can all go into the town meeting with a unified budget proposal.
I understand. And so that leads me to a question to Mike or Craig. Is Article 3, has it always been voted on prior to, or have we occasionally gone to recommended at town meeting by the finance committee? Because we will vote all of these articles tonight if they don't get recommended at town meeting.
Right, Mr. Chairman. Aside from years where we had high uncertainty, thinking back to the interim year between Charlie and there was one year where we did not go in with the budget recommendation made for town meeting. But I think every other year that I can recall, we've always had a budget recommendation for town meeting. So and if we can't reach it, we can't reach it. But I think it's always been our goal to get there. And I can think of only one occasion when we didn't. So that's the history of that, at least.
Well, nothing says that we can't amend our recommendation. And if we vote to recommend as it is right now, then we can do that now. If we recommend a change and the select board changes their recommended budget, I mean, with deference to what Mr. McCaffrey just said, my intent is to vote the articles that we can tonight and be done. I guess we're not really, I mean, I guess we could have recommend at town meeting, but I prefer not to do that.
Yeah,
So-
it's good to have a recommended budget in the package because that's one of the things the voters will be looking for.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd just like to state that in the event that the finance committee is going to recommend changes, I'm mindful of the calendar.
No, I understand that. We just can't be locked in by the calendar, and
No,
it's
no.
our prerogative to.
Can you just finish?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
My statement was to be that the select board, I would certainly try to convene a meeting of the select board for early next week, knowing that Monday's a holiday, so that we could have agreement perhaps in time for the printing of the warrant, because I think there's value in having the budget in the warrant as well. So I will call a meeting of the select board to
Right.
review the comments from the FinCom hopefully before the deadline. And before
Deirdre,
we-
Deirdre, you have to go to print on Tuesday, Tuesday of next week?
Tuesday morning, correct. They're hoping to receive it Monday.
So there's essentially no time. It's either
Okay.
we vote it as written or we go to town meeting without a recommendation until right at town meeting.
Well, the only thing is, because the town meeting was moved up to the Saturday as opposed to the Monday, the residents need to receive it by Saturday, a week from this Saturday. And it just so if we get it to the post office by Friday, it meets the requirements. So I think giving it to the printer on Wednesday to turn around in 2 days is, I just don't think that's doable. Tuesday morning, yes. Or Tuesday noon.
Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking here is two meetings, a select board meeting to address any recommendations that we may come up with now, and then another meeting for us to vote, which again, I don't want to, none of that sounds real plausible. So all this discussion is good. It may be irrelevant. If the committee feels like it is ready to vote on what's been presented to us now without any changes, then we can do that. I'm not, I mean, I have my opinions on it, but I'm one vote. I'm the chair, I'm one vote. You know,
Mr.
I
Chair.
need to hear from others. Go ahead, Jody, I'm sorry.
So perhaps we could actually, discuss the budget. And one of the issues that I continue to have is the way that it's presented to us in terms of the difference between the requests and the recommended, because I think it's more helpful for us to look at what was the FY21 versus what the town administrator has recommended. That gives us a better sense of what this recommended budget would actually look like in terms of increases. So, while we've been talking, I worked on this on a very messy spreadsheet. So one of the, as we look through the different increases that are recommended here for line 1, general government, it's a 10% increase from what last year's budget was. And, there's 2 new positions in there, IT, which we've discussed as, definitely essential. And then there's another, a departmental assistant increase with the town administrator's office and the selectman's office, select board's office. And then various other increases as well. If you look line by line, we have a 2.2 increase proposed for public safety. For middle schools, that's 4.3%. For public works, it's a 7.7%. And then health and human services, for the additional hours requested for the Council on Aging and additional hours for or additional stipend for veteran services, it's a 22.3% increase. Obviously,
Jody,
dollar amounts.
Jody, which department is the 22%?
That
Council on Aging?
is the Health and Human Services, which is Board of Health, Council on Aging, and Veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what you're reading is the line by line, and all of those, most of those departmental increases are based on COLA, step ladder, you name it, contractual, union negotiation wages. And
Actually,
am I wrong?
Yeah, most of the biggest increases are due to increased staff.
Right, the five that are in the above service level requests, right?
Exactly. So that puts
Yeah.
those line items, up a lot higher than the other lines. And, we're looking at an overall budget increase of about 4.6%. So, that's kind of that bottom line number of additional funds needed would be about $1.63 million for the year. And of course, that includes the contractual increases, the benefits increases, a lot of things that we don't have control over. But I think, those are the things that are more helpful to look at of where are the larger increases. And, that's the Health and Human Services and general government. And so then the question, remains, are we as a finance committee supportive of those staffing increases? And what does that mean going forward? What does that mean for future budgets as well? Because we are committing to staff if we are recommending approval of this budget, which has increased staff levels in it. So that's kind of my.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Carol.
Carol Johnston, Finance Director. I just want to point out that it looks as if there are large increases in the staff at the VMB, but you have to remember that the FY21 budget was approved with a 10% reduction in the staff at the VMB. And so to bring us up to 100% for staffing the VMB, it's really just a matter of we took a 10% reduction in order to make the 5% cut overall for general government last year. So it's an artificial increase. The hours got restored back in December 1st, but they were not included in the original FY21 budget.
So point of order, I guess, Mr. Chairman. The FY21 town meeting adopted budget does not include the reinstatements.
It includes the reinstatement, but the reinstatements aren't for the full year in the FY21 adopted. It's because we were reduced staff from July 1st until December 1st.
Okay.
That's helpful, Carol. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Mr.
So
Chairman?
that's partially why I'm really just looking at the above level service requests. It's
right. Can I have another point of order question, I guess?
I don't know what a point of order question is, but Craig, you can ask a question.
Okay. The budget that's presented without these $175,908 of above level service is about a 4% growth. Is that right, Carol? When adjusted for.
Yes.
Yeah. So everything adjusted. So if we did not add any of these above level requests, it would be 4% growth as the school came in with their 4% growth. So these, I think you've got the exact right approach, Pete. If our policy is 4% growth, then we look at what's exceeding that. And these 6 items are the items doing that. And I think that's where the discussion needs to revolve. I'm not one for the school or the municipal side to say that it's as long as they're operating within the parameters of a 4% growth, really, except for rare exceptions, how that 4% growth is achieved. So but above level service, I think, is where we do weigh in on items.
Mr. Chairman, just to confirm for Mr. Schultz, that's exactly what we intended in the way we presented it.
Thank you.
I apologize if it became confusing, but that's why they're called out.
Yeah, thank you. This is exactly how I would have expected it to be presented. So I think that it's really focusing on those 6 items as you were doing, Pete. I think that's the right way to do it.
So further discussion on those 6 items. I've given a little bit of, my opinion on them. Yeah, I mean, even the increase in the veteran service officer stipend, it's such a small amount, it seems very achievable. Is it amongst the top priorities. I say this as a veteran, and he gave the gentleman that came in gave a great presentation, and he's looked like he's doing hard work, and he's showing a lot of initiative, and you certainly don't want to stunt that. So could go either way on that. I'm having a hard time with the Council on Aging one. You know, and that's why I'm like, my approach would be, you know, give them half the request now. We've done this in the past where, you know, where the fire chief needs, he wants an administrative assistant. We can't give everybody everything. So, you know, you see what you can do, and perhaps half of that is, or even some portion of it, doesn't even have to be half. Some portion of it is better than nothing.
Chair?
Go ahead, Jody.
Could I don't want to put Ms. Johnson on the spot too much here, but I was wondering if we had an amount that came from the marijuana funds for last year's budget.
Yes,
because
we, hold on one second.
the
It's
marijuana
98
impact fees.
Right, the marijuana impact fees, it was the 98,000 for the police officer and the marijuana stipend.
So that was last year, and so it's the same for this year.
It just happens to be very close, right?
Okay, okay, thank you.
Last year it was $95,940. This year it's $98,131.
And Mr. Chairman, Carol,
Go
is that included in the budget, or is that going to be included in the budget but with a separate funding source? I see now. Never mind.
That was included in the budget, and so like you and I talked about, it won't be considered in the multiplier for next year's budget.
Right, because the marijuana funded items are
right.
A year funding item. So am I correct, Carol, that, and I'm working off of a little bit older data, but we're looking at about, what's the total growth on the municipal side for the non-marijuana stipend funded, the non-marijuana funded items? Is it like 6, or is it over 6, or is it, you have a ballpark on that? And that's excluding, you know, the debt service, the health insurance, those common items. If everything on this list was included.
Everything on the list were included. Hold on one second.
The 6 items, not the road maintenance and tree removal.
Right. If you want to talk about something else while I calculate this, you can.
Well, thank you.
So,
the reason I'm asking that, though, and I'll let Carol calculate. Yeah, we took a position on 4%. Obviously, there are things that come up, and we all acknowledge that. I see that the I see that the IT position is one of those things, and the DPW enterprise fund issue that we just discussed is one of those things. The other ones are choices that we're making, basically. I see the veterans as a great choice. I say that not as a veteran, but as a financial person. I think the services he's brought, he was showing how he was saving the town money by getting grants and reimbursements. So I think that position actually pays for itself. Everything else on the list is open in my mind for, you know, consideration as not funding. And I need reasons, good reasons to fund them, because I'd like to get as much into the DPW enterprise fund solution as possible. I think the 51,000 plus benefits is a great start. I don't know if any of these others should be reassigned there. I know we have a position coming up that is currently allocated between general fund and at least 2 of the enterprise funds. That's on a post-it note. 50% to water, 10% for storm, and 40% for general fund that we discussed at our last meeting, and they work the transfer station. That's a replacement.
It's an open position, right?
Right. But I would think that if we corrected that position, so it was 100% general fund, that would be another step towards closing our enterprise fund gap. But I'm just trying to think of solutions to a problem that I didn't even know I was not aware of the magnitude of when we started doing all these discussions of splits and other things. And to me, that is the most pressing issue, or second most pressing. I'm still putting IT first because not having an IT director with breaches and everything else is critical. But to me, that's the second most pressing issue facing the town, is correcting this enterprise fund.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Michael.
May, thank you. So I just wanted to talk very briefly about the Executive Office Select Board position of the Department Assistant 2 increase from 18 to 35 hours. I apologize to those who have already memorized our discussion from a month or two ago about this, but I just wanted to just briefly summarize that again to let the committee know that when I started here about 4 years ago, I realized pretty quickly that this office was seriously understaffed. This office is the busiest municipal office I've worked in my 27-year career. The staff we have here work very hard at their, in their positions. We simply don't have enough bodies and enough hours in the day to get everything done. And certainly with the lack of a human resource professional here, it has been very difficult for me to properly run that important division of municipal government. And it's caused other areas of our operation to go unattended. In my professional evaluations by the select board over the last couple of years, the main points of that the board has pointed out is maybe some lack of strategic planning, visioning for the community, additional grant applications. That's simply not possible under the current structure. So, my thought in this position is that $21,000 to increase this position is the most inexpensive way to get a lot more horsepower out of this office and look at the bigger picture in the community. Certainly I'm a team player, and if the feeling is there are more important priorities for the town, then so be it. But those issues will not be addressed as long as the staffing level here remains the same. So just summarize that issue for the committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have in regards to that.
I don't have any questions, and at this point, we need to move on and get off of dead center here. I think that it looks to me like the options are request that the select board, that we come up with a recommendation, that we communicate to the select board, that we don't recommend approval at this time, and that we request changes to items, some of those items within the must fund, IT, and 1 through 5 following, or we vote to approve it as is. I personally think that the Council on Aging number is high and ought to be adjusted. I don't think that it's been justified as well as some of the others, including the detail that we've received for some of the other requests. In addition, the circumstances I think are different. But I'm not in favor of zeroing that out. That's not what I'm suggesting. I just think that there's probably a middle ground that can be had there. Obviously, number 4 is right at the top of the list. So that's where I am with it. And I'm looking for a motion that we either vote to approve it as written or as presented, or we come up with some language that we would not vote, and we would basically end up voting at pre-town meeting or recommended at town meeting for the motion. And we communicate with the select board the changes that we're looking for.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I just say that I would be willing to look broader than these 5 items if they can go back into their budgets and find other areas to cut, because these are the most critical things and there's something else in there that needs to change. I'm after a bottom line. I'm a bottom line kind of person. I just think the growth that we're showing, I don't know if Carol's calculated that yet. I think it's just a little bit too high with all these new positions. that's not to say I'm opposed to any of these changes at all. I think it's the bottom line number. And these are the 5 that are falling onto the list. Just driving the 6 that are falling onto the list that's driving the bottom line up. So if there's other places where trimming can occur, again, at 4%, I don't have an opinion. I think that they've done their job as elected officials. Above 4% is when we start coming in at it. And I'd give the enterprise fund, no, I'm sorry, the enterprise highway department fund fix as a given, and the IT director is a given. So that differential of money, which is $81,000, $82,000. Trying to do math in my head, Chris. Don't smile, don't smirk. It's hard for me to do math in my head today. But about 82,000. If there were other trimming that could do, that's kind of where I see it needing to be. I think we're about $81,000 out of balance is my thought on that. And I don't disagree with any of the positions. I have a plan that I'd love to see the rec department funded fully, through operations. I've said that many, many times. I think it's all revolving the revolving fund. Once we get that straightened out, I think it can happen. So those are the lines that I'd be looking at. So I don't care what lines are touched necessarily, but it's about $81,000 that I'd be looking for, basically.
Craig, I don't think you can look at the bottom line until Carol does answer that question that you asked.
Yeah, I was trying to do it on my worksheet and I got about 6.25%, but let's see what she comes up with.
Okay.
Well, it's
Kathy?
not, excuse me, it's, this is Carol. Do you want me to speak now?
Just hold on one second, Carol. We'll come back to you, I promise. Kathy?
Just 10 seconds. In thinking about this with the marijuana funds that are available, to me, the executive branch of a town deserves a piece of that money. Calls come in, inquiries come in for more business, questions. Karen can tell you this, Mike can tell you this. Is there any way that some of the funds from the marijuana money be directed to the executive office? And my second question would be, if Mike could trim down the number of hours, but if not, would the 3,000 that the capital planning group is asking for staff, could Mike's department absorb that $3,000 and then take some money from the marijuana? Thanks.
Mike, do you care to comment?
As far as the staffing for the capital, that's certainly possible. And that would be preferential to me cutting the 35 hours down. But because certainly, as the finance committee knows, as soon as you reach 20 hours, you're a benefit eligible position. So once you reach that point, I like to try to fully utilize those individuals for as many hours as reasonably possible. But I'd have to have that discussion with the select board about the question on the HCA funds. I don't think the idea is too far-fetched, but it just hasn't been really explored in light of all the other requests that have come in for HCA funds. So that's something I'd have to look at.
Mr. Chair, through Mike, do you think that's possible, Mike? That I know maybe even Jim McCaffrey could chime in on this, because that money's there. I know what kind of, when it first started, the type of calls that your office was fielding, and along with, that should be a top priority for using the marijuana funds. And, it's something that look into, and, I would see if the selectmen would choose to vote to support something like that. And then I'd be all in favor of supporting with the use of marijuana money. And thank you. We'll see what the rest of the committee thinks.
Could I just respond a little bit? I think it's probably pretty clear that the executive office, even just accounting for the money,
Yeah.
whether it's the finance team or whatever, is doing more things because of that. So I think there's potential opportunity there, perhaps. I do want to just say a word for the capital planning committee, and because I guess I'm on it. This is the only committee that I'm aware of in the town right now that does this volume of spreadsheeting and work and follow through. I mean, it's very analogous to, say, the PBC, which has support, or the Finance Committee for that matter. This is a committee that I think really needs the support. Now, whether it comes from part of the work that the Selectman's office is going to be performing if we get the additional position, I don't know how you sort of, these small positions are pieces of people. So I just wanted to say that I think the Capital Planning Committee really needs some support.
I'll certainly second that. So all that said, we're still in a position where we have to, as a finance committee, one, we have to move on. We have to get on to the rest of the articles. And so we're still left, all that said, on the details, and the devil is in the details, but we still have to decide as to whether we're going to vote Article 3 as written, as presented, or we're going to recommend at town meeting. That's, that's before us. We know the answer to that question right now. So I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we recommend at town meeting for Article 3. I don't think we're in a position to make a decision now, which is discussion, so I'll wait.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we defer voting on Article 3 until town meeting. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy McGinnis. I believe that muddies the waters, and I would like to, there is a motion made, and to vote on that, and then come back and start saying what we agree regarding the 5 items.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see if Carol's got the number yet for the growth percentage.
So,
Go ahead, Carol.
So Craig, so on all in, we're up over 6.25%. But when you consider that of that 6.25%, 98,131 is from marijuana impact funds. So that really has to come off of the number. And then we have an additional 36,714 coming in from the ambulance revolving fund, and an additional 44,400 coming in from the town of Norfolk. It reduces our actual ask to just over 4%.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Please hold on one second, Joyce. I just want to
Absolutely.
finish this particular discussion.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just a little confused how we can be at 4% with the budget presented, and then those holdbacks come out, and then we have this.
Well, we're not at, we're at 6.25% with everything in. But then if you add in, if you take the number, just as we discussed this, Craig,
Yeah.
When you take the number that you had as your base number, you had to add the 85,000 in from the ambulance revolving fund for last year. That made our starting point 8,335,497. Added 4% to that, it makes our base 8,668,917.
Correct.
Then we have to add in the new revenues that are coming specifically for ambulance revolving fund, which is 36,714. And then we have to add in the 44,400 from the town of Norfolk, who's reimbursing us for that portion of the IT director. And then on top of that, you take the 98,131 coming from the marijuana impact funds.
I guess that's the question that we differed on, that 98,000. I was told that position was not listed in the budget. Is he listed in the budget?
All of the 98,131 is listed in the budget. We reduced information went over to the finance committee that the select board had approved the items, and they reduced the school resource officer down so that they could include the rec department information for the teen program coordinator. Hold on one second. So what they did, out of that 98,131 is the library extension, July and August for Saturdays for 2,100. The school resource officer is $61,030. The marijuana stipends, 10,800. The Recreation Department Summer Program for Developmental and Physical Disabilities is 9,200. And the Teen Program Coordinator for the Rec Department is 15,000. So all of those changes were made and are incorporated in our current budget as you see it.
Okay, so just to be painfully clear on this to me, the police department budget of $2,261,962 includes the school resource officer in that budget.
Yeah, 61, partial, 61,030.75, right. And also the marijuana stipend of 10,800.
Okay, so that's what I need to factor in. Okay.
And then you'll see when you look at the sheet, as you go down, you'll see the changes from the town administrator proposed budget. You'll see the additional library hours, and you'll see the additional recreation hours for dollars.
Yeah, it's gonna be, I want to check all the numbers. I've looked it over once and I was getting it to tie out differently, but I'll talk to you again about it in the future a little bit more too.
Okay. Joyce? Joyce?
Sorry, no, I thought I was unmuted. No, I'm good. It got answered.
Okay, all right. So any more discussion, because there is a motion to defer voting on Article 3, which I appreciate muddies the waters. So this really is a vote to either muddy the waters or accept the budget recommendations, which include those 6 items for above service level requests. Those are the choices between us as I see it, and I think everybody agrees.
Point of order,
without getting-
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go right ahead.
Is there a third choice as to have the finance committee allocate where it wants the money to go?
We certainly can discuss that.
Okay.
And we will, if we don't vote on this, we will communicate our recommendations to the select board for them to make. I think it would behoove us, especially if we're concerned about muddying the waters, that we will communicate what we would like to see. There would be some sort of dialogue or adjustment by them, or none at all, by the time it goes to town meeting, the budget. And then we would recommend at town meeting whether or not we agree or disagree with that. So ultimately, I think the goal here is that we don't want to go to town meeting not having voted to concur with the presented budget. We can do that now, or we can wait until later and see if any recommendations we make would be adopted. Last chance for comments, and then I'll ask for a vote.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Chris Fogarty, Millis Recreation. I mean, is this the last chance to plead our case? I don't even want to embarrass myself by doing it. Is this it?
Well, you're certainly welcome to. I don't think you need to, Chris. It's really a matter of whether the finance committee wants to accept the bottom line recommendation for those above service level requests that are in our meeting materials, or requests some specific changes, which we haven't even discussed yet, not in earnest, or not in a level of detail that we would communicate, that we know yet. That discussion would come after this vote. But you certainly are welcome to. I just don't think right now is the right time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think if the motion is to dismiss, I think I think you're right. If the motion is to make our own budget, recommend it, then I think that's when the discussion occurs, for Chrissy's sake, because we're not going to the budget.
And it's not to dismiss, it's just to defer. Like our motion right now is just to defer the vote on Article 3 for purposes of this meeting. We will vote on this, at one point or another, prior to town meeting. So I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Pete, aye. Craig,
I to defer, yes.
aye to defer. Kathy,
I don't know what I want, Chair. I know what I want, but how do I vote? I want to have something in place for the selectmen tonight.
so you're
am I-
nay.
Nay, thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. Jody,
Aye.
Joyce,
I'm not sure. I guess I did defer.
Jim,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
so by my tally, the vote is 6 ayes and 1 nay. And I appreciate everybody's vote. It's not where we want to be necessarily, but there's been a lot of discussions on what's led me to this is a lot of the discussion on the enterprise fund issues and not necessarily agreeing, with 100% of the above level service requests. So, okay, so to keep this going on Article 3, or maybe we should go through the rest of the articles that we haven't voted on yet.
Number 2.
2 is on the previous. Sorry.
It wasn't voted on. Right there.
Okay, number 2 is on the additional wages and expenses. So I will take a motion. Mike, why did we skip this one last time? Did we lose Mike?
I'm sorry. Yes, I was muted. I think it was because it was a financial article and there was some desire just to wait
Okay.
for this meeting.
Okay.
But this is a balancing
Yep.
that we do every year at the end of the year. We're still having some internal discussions with some of the departments, but it's pretty much all set and ready for approval for the finance committee. Really what we're looking at is just approving the base numbers for transfers. And I will update the committee. I think you're meeting again on the 28th. But I would definitely recommend the committee recommending this article. We do need to make the transfers one form or another.
Okay, I'll take a motion on Article 2.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I recommend approval of Article 2 and the amounts as written in the warrant.
Second.
And it's been seconded. So it's been moved and seconded that we vote to approve Article 2 and the amounts listed in the warrant. Discussion. Okay, go to a voice vote. Pete, aye. Craig,
Aye. Was I muted?
Kathy,
Sorry. My
Kathy?
turn?
Yes.
No.
Jody,
Aye.
Joyce,
No.
Jim,
Aye.
and Katie.
Aye.
Okay, I have it as 5 yeas, 2 nays, and that's closes that one for simple majority. For us anyway, it would be simple majority anyway. Okay, I believe. Next, Article 4.
Lost my article list. Got too many open tabs.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I I move that we recommend approval of Article 4 in the amount of 85,000, which would come from taxation.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we vote to approve 85,000 from taxation in order to fund first year cost contracts between Town of Millis and the SEIU local and the professional fire and Millis, as well as the professional firefighters of Millis Local 4704. Discussion. Okay, none heard. Pete, aye. Craig?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Jody?
Aye.
Joyce?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Katie?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Article 5.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to remind the Finance Committee, I did send out some adjusted motion earlier this evening, just so that if those have older motions, they'll know that there's a slight decrease on the totals of each item having to do with a slight decrease in the indirect costs. And
Okay,
that's for
thank you for
Article
that.
5, 6, and 7.
Okay, thank you for that. I definitely would have whiffed. Deirdre, that's in our package, right? Indirect allocation.
Yes, it is. And
So
the
it's in the
article
motions.
list that's displayed is reflects the updated figures.
Okay, so the motions as written are accurate. The amounts and the motions.
No,
On the article list, that's the right amount.
on the article list on this.
Not the draft motions.
They are not. They were.
Okay.
They weren't updated.
Okay. The article list. Okay. Article 5, actually probably can't vote that, correct? Since there's potential for change, or is that not the case? It would come out of reimbursements from the general fund, any changes?
I would think those all relate to budgets, and I wouldn't vote 5, 6, and 7 until we.
Yeah. Okay, all right, well, we're not gonna vote on those. 5, 6, and 7, where does that leave us to Article 11?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Which-
just one comment. As I was
Yep.
thinking about this, and I apologize for not being on top of my game as much as I typically am sometimes, but
I know your COVID shot got the best of you.
it's knocked me on my butt. I'm sorry, but
Listen, I was home in bed all day yesterday.
yeah, so I should have done that today, but I tried to push through it. But I want to make sure we do include a budget in the warrant, even if it's labeled draft everywhere, so people have stuff to look at. We did that one year in error. We did not put any budget in the warrant, and it caused problems because people didn't know what they're referring to. But even if it's labeled draft or proposed on that watermark behind it, then we can have the final budget to be proposed and voted at town meeting, just something so people can see it. It's not going to change dramatically on every line, but I think it's important to get that out there so people have it. So thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
and to expand on that, I would request that the presentation of the budget include the variance between what was voted at town meeting 21 and what is proposed by the town administrator select board for fiscal year 22, that there be that variance and the percentage difference between those, because that is a more meaningful variance for us to look at than just what the budget requests were versus what is being proposed by the town administrator's office and the select board.
Carol, do you care to comment?
I'm not sure which one you're asking about, Jody. Is that on 5, 6, and 7, the enterprise funds?
No, on
Probably
the
all of them.
operating budget.
Okay.
Yeah, we've discussed it in prior years and that's what went into the warrant in prior years, but the other presentation kind of persists, but I find that to be a little bit confusing as to, what FY22 budget am I looking at?
Okay. All right, Article 11.
Mr. Chairman, just to let the Finance Committee know that the Select Board at their meeting this past Monday voted after lengthy discussion to recommend dismissal of Article 11. The lack of available funds.
Okay. So I would like a motion to, looks like we're looking for a motion to dismiss.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I move that we recommend dismissal of Article 11.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend dismissal of Article 11. Discussion. None heard. Voice vote. Pete, aye. Kathy?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Jody?
Aye.
Joyce?
Aye.
Katie?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Thank you. Article, I'm sorry. I believe the next one is Article 15. Capital items. I can make a motion, right? I move that we vote to approve the following capital items in the amount of $657,131. Actually, hold on. So, Mike, for these articles, these capital funded articles, can you tell me, so the funding of the last three obviously would be water enterprise funds, correct?
Yeah, yes, and the top three would be from free cash.
Free cash and these are new leases, correct?
No, these are all already committed leases.
So these are must pays and already accounted for.
That is correct. There is a new lease later there in the warrant.
Yep.
There is a new lease for computers at the schools in Article 18.
Yep.
But these leases are all prior year committed leases.
So the funding source for the top three would be free cash.
That's correct.
And the bottom three would be water enterprise. Does it need to be more specific than that?
Water
Reserve
enterprise
funds.
reserve fund. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I move that the committee vote to approve Article 15 in the amount of $657,131 with the top three items, the bus lease, computer lease, and cruiser leases coming from free cash. Each of those respective to $89,999, $46,600, and $34,932. And the last three items on the list, coming from water enterprise fund reserve funds, respective to each of the next three, $200,000, $255,600, and $30,000 for the water systems response plan.
Mr. Chair, I second that.
Thank you, Joyce. It's been moved and seconded to vote to approve as previously listed. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy, I'd just like to call everyone's attention to the amount of money that's being used from these enterprise funds that could have, you know where I'm going, Pete. Thank you.
Well, actually, Kathy, I'll piggyback on that. You know, the enterprise funds still could go, free cash can still go to pay for things. We don't like to do it, and I agree with the philosophy that the finance committee and other committees, select board have used. But free cash could go to pay for things that aren't properly allocated. I don't advocate for it here. I don't think there's anything wrong with this money being spent. In fact, all these PFAS things, you know, there's a lot more to come to be spent on PFAS. So I don't have any problems voting in favor of this article as written. Any more discussion? Okay. None heard. All those in favor, or excuse me, Pete, yes. Kathy,
No.
no. Craig,
Yes.
Jody,
Yes.
Joyce,
Can I abstain?
yes. Katie,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Deirdre, I'm just making sure I've got this right. I've got 5 yays, 1 nay, 1 abstain.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. Next article is Article 17. This is for road maintenance and repairs.
Mr. Chairman, this has changed since the last time you saw this. The select board at their meeting this past Monday voted to increase, and they've also increased the amount in the actual warrant. Increase the amount by an additional $48,805.23 by transferring funds from the Clyde F. Brown roof repairs article that was approved back in June of 2017. Those funds were ultimately not needed as part of that and are available for new appropriation by the town meeting. And the board.
What's the new amount, Mike?
The total new amount?
Yes, please.
It's $143,805.23.
Okay, so that the increase is already reflected in our packet.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mike. I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 17 for road repairs and maintenance in the amount of $143,805.23 to come 50,000 from taxation, 45,000 from free cash, and $48,805.23 transferred from Article 26 from the ATM of June 5th, 2017.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we vote to approve the funding of road maintenance and repairs in the amount of $143,805.23 from the funding sources previously listed. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jody.
As one who has recently suffered some wheel damage from a pothole nearby, I would recommend allocating these additional funds for road maintenance. I think there's been a lot of discussion in the town that we are sorely lacking in road maintenance funds. And I think if, the town was able to find these extra unallocated, approximately $49,000, I think allocating them to road repairs is a good use of those funds based on our current demands.
Thanks, Jody. Anybody else? Okay, none heard. We'll move to a vote. Pete, yay. Kathy,
Yay.
Craig,
Yay.
Jody,
Yay.
Joyce,
Yay.
Katie,
Yay.
Jim,
Yay.
Thank you, everybody. Next is, did we vote on Article 18, Deirdre? My notes are, I don't think we did.
Yes, you did.
We did,
last-
okay.
Yep.
And it was approval?
It was an approval, not unanimous, but yes.
Okay.
So the next one is Article 20.
20, okay. I'll take a motion on Article 20. Which is the Braun property.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Kathy.
I make a motion that the Finance Committee support the purchase of the Leo Braun property in the amount of appropriate the money for $1 million. And I don't see the funding source, Mr. Chair, but that's my motion.
It's by borrowing.
Borrowing, okay, by borrowing. Thank you, everyone.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the committee, that we vote to approve the purchase of property at 377 Village Street via an amount of $1 million via borrowing. Discussion. I'll begin. Obviously, I think we've all given this some thought, and I'm going to support it. Even though the revenue is appealing for many of the issues that, you know, are old issues like roads and emerging issues like new general fund revenue needed to cover allocation issues amongst other cost centers. I still think that a compelling argument's been made that this is an opportunity that just shouldn't be thrown away for the immediate need of revenue, and I also think that it has the potential to serve some other long-term needs that the town may not recognize now, but it could later. So it's an opportunity not to be passed, and that's an argument that several of you have made, and one that I view it that way as well. So that's my that's where I'm headed on this one. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. McCaffrey.
Yes, I'll ask through you to Mike and Carol. Have we furnished the Finance Committee? The board voted on a bonding, a term for bonding and a recommended rate. I think it's a 25-year bond. Is that right, Mike?
Actually, I think it was a 20-year bond.
20-year.
With a, I think it was equal principal payments. Is that correct?
Yes,
Carol?
yes. That was the
That was
one we
the-
had done.
right. It was the least expensive option as far as the payment of interest.
Total cost, right.
Yes. And
What was the annual cost in the future, roughly?
I think
70?
it started at 70,000 and then decreased from there.
Okay.
So, Mike, to put that in real dollars and cents terms, not that anybody's tax bill is going to go up because of this, because there are offsets in the lending schedule or the debt schedule. But I think the average, I want to make sure I phrase this the right way, but it's basically the cost to the residents is $20. And that's got to be annually. But
That's
it is
correct.
not an increase in the tax bill because there are offsets in the debt schedule.
Exactly. There will not be an increase to the average tax bill based on the approval of this project. But if people want to understand for the average taxpayer paying their tax bill, $20 of that bill would be used towards the payment of this item for an average taxpayer.
And said another way, their tax bill is not going to go down by $20 either.
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. Pete, yay. Kathy,
I'm not muted. Yay.
Craig,
Yay.
Jody,
Yay.
Joyce,
Yay.
Katie,
Yay.
Jim.
Nay.
Nay, as in no?
No.
Thank you. I have 6 yeas, 1 nay, Deirdre.
Yep.
Okay, cruising right along. Defer, approved.
Article
I think
30.
30.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, I will be presenting these articles, and I wasn't sure if we want to just leave these as recommend at town meeting, not knowing kind of where other articles go. I think in the past we have made a recommendation, but reading through some of the recommendations that have been given to us as a town for kind of not putting a whole lot of money into OPEB, and that affects our bond rating. I didn't know if we wanted to leave that open for recommendation at town meeting or to recommend dismissal.
And as I recollect, I think there's not, as currently written, there's not a plan to put, so the select board is recommending dismissal of Article 30
That's correct.
and Article 31.
Correct.
So Jody, factor that in. I think that was as of Monday night. That's what they, I believe. I'm not certain. I think that's where I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
Jim, do you care to offer something on that?
Yes, we voted to request dismissal for lack of funds.
Yeah.
And I guess from a policy point of view, it in a sense gets deferred to see what free cash looks like. And if we find that we have some free cash that we're starting to generate, we may want to, as Jody indicated, develop some sort of policy to divert some of that money certainly into OPEB. And of course, as the total budget grows, then we probably need to consider additional contributions to stabilization fund to remain at the 5% figure. So.
Okay. I also heard that our bond rating as of Monday night was, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, Carol or Mike or Jim. I thought it was AA3 or AA plus or something along those lines.
It's AA3. It remained the same as it was last year.
And how frequently does that get updated?
As often as you go out for bonding.
Okay.
The bonding was for the DPW building, so the addition of about $3.5 million of bonded debt did not affect the bond rating. And we got a.
And the next time,
I don't know.
Would be if the Braun property gets approved, that would likely be the next. Would that be the next bonding, or no? We're talking something different. Finance, in terms of finance, or borrowing or bonding.
I believe that would be the next one, unless Carol, if you have any other information on that.
No, that would be the next one. And where it's going to be so soon to our other bonding, I will probably be fine. But it's usually like once a year they do the Moody's when you're going out for bonding.
Okay, all right. And then the last thing I'll add, just to be, I'm a pretty straight shooter and very objective, but just because this is what the select board is recommending, we don't necessarily, we're not tied to this. We've potentially muddied the waters where I personally think it's appropriate on the budget, which is a difficult decision, but we could do it here too, but I'm not in favor of that. So that said, I think I'll take a motion on Article 30.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I move that we recommend dismissal of Article 30.
That sounded like a second. Or maybe not. Maybe it was just a cough. Okay, if it's moved and seconded that we vote to dismiss Article 30. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I think, as Mr. McCaffrey mentioned, this is something that we could choose to take up for the fall town meeting.
Mhm.
when we see free cash. I think it's something that we continue to defer at our peril. And so working to create a policy as to how we're going to address this funding or lack of funding, I think makes sense, particularly as we start seeing higher free cash numbers, presumably, that we do need to start to address this, and perhaps in a similar way to addressing the stabilization fund, which as we talk about our next article, I would also like to recommend that we update that policy as well. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. So on Article 30, any further discussion? None heard. Pete, yay. Kathy, if this is, we're voting to dismiss.
Yay. So, excuse me.
Kathy, yay. Craig,
Yay.
Jody,
Yay.
Joyce,
Yay.
Katie,
Yay.
Jim.
Yay.
And Article 31, stabilization fund.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jody.
I move that we recommend dismissal of Article 31.
I second it, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved and seconded to dismiss Article 31. Discussion. And we'll vote to dismiss. Pete, yay. Kathy,
Yay.
Craig,
Yay.
Jody,
Yay.
Joyce,
Yay.
Katie,
Yay.
and Jim.
Yay.
Okay. I think that is all that that we opted to defer last time. At this point, I think we need to go back to Article 3, or specifically the operating budget, and discuss what items we feel we need to give the feedback to the select board. And that can be a number, it can be a percent, it can be, reduce these by half, it could be remove this this above service level request outright. Frankly, that's what I recommend. I recommend we adjust the 6 items, or rather than just giving them a percentage, but I'm open to any of them. But I just need to keep us on track and make sure that we cannot conclude this meeting without having feedback that we can communicate to them. We've kind of put ourselves in this position now.
Mr. Chair, if
Go
no
ahead, Kathy.
senior members want to speak, I would support not giving a percentage. I would support giving the position or the amounts.
And did you have any suggestions? So if I assume everybody's online and has access to the Finance Committee meeting material site, and if you look at the link for the meeting last week, there's a document there that's the FY22 operating budget above service level request, and it's the select board recommendations. That's the table that I'm looking for. It's got a yellow row across the top. That's just, again, one place that we can look for, but these are where the majority of the required increases to the budget come from. The $175,000 for those 6 items.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Kathy.
I'd let the more numbers people, but my sense is that I support the veterans fellow. They bring in more and they've saved the town more money than he's ever going to earn in this town. I support that. I support the IT person, and I would support the executive office increase in hours if those increase included the assistant for the capital planning, because the capital planning works hand in hand with the executive office. So that would just make sense. And that I would request that the select board take 50% or 60, or perhaps even all of it, because I've known the calls that come in, as Mr. McCaffrey has stated, from the marijuana funds. It's not a motion. Those are my thoughts. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Greg.
I'll just give my thoughts on it too. I agree, the IT position, the veterans position. I'd like to see the executive office position funded through the marijuana funds, as we discussed. I don't think there's funds in this budget cycle to do that. It may have to wait till November when we get the second half of our HCA checks, but I don't think that's a bad use of those funds. And since some items might fall off between now and then, it might be a deferral of the expense. Instead of incurring it right now, it might be incurred in November, which is, I don't think is a horrible thing, because there's a light at the end of the tunnel at that point. DPW position I support, and the recreation assistant position at 10 hours. I know the problem I have with that one right now is that we're having a funding issue with the revolving fund, because we're not running the programs. So I guess my question to Mike is, are we incurring those costs right now, or when will those costs start to be incurred again? And when will we need those funds again?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we are incurring the costs of the director's salary. And I know that the rec department is gearing up for programs. And we'll be collecting fees very soon, but it again, as the committee knows, it's been a very difficult year for them. And I would expect that by July, they will be having programs and collecting fees again, but they've probably been one of the hardest hit departments during the pandemic.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd like to find some funding mechanism to make sure we don't have a short-term crisis, but I believe once the revolving fund comes in, this begs for the full solution, not just a patchwork solution. So that's the one that I'm not confident on in my mind yet, but the other ones I agree with.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add this is not going to conclude the discussion at all, but I'll just add that the IT, I would leave that as is. The veterans, I'd leave it as is, not necessarily in priority order, certainly. The executive office, I would like, I don't put a percentage or a number on it. I just think that the people that know best, and that's Mike and others, they put a percentage on what they think the marijuana impact is to the executive office. And I applaud Kathy, I think, came up with that. It's a great idea. And the Council on Aging, I think that number needs to be halved. The DPW needs to stay where it is, and the rec probably should stay where it is too. I did have one question though on Mike, on the other HCA requests, the ones that we discussed. Where are those contained? Are they? Forgive me, I just forget. Are they in it? They're not in another article. They're in the budget elsewhere, correct?
They're in the budget and the line items where they fall. So when you look at the budget, you'll see the 2,100 for the library. In the rec department, you'll see the 24,200 for the 2 programs for them.
Yep.
And the school resource officer, you'll see it's included in the salary line for the police office, and also the marijuana stipends are in the.
So the motion for Article 3 will contain the HCA as a funding source.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so, Carol, did the approved requests, or did the requests that are contained in the budget, did those exhaust all of the HCA impact available dollars?
Yes, we only have $98,131 left.
All right, so that's reiteration of what Craig was talking about before. Sorry, I'm just connecting, just making sure.
It's
what's that?
It's tricky. I'm telling you, there's a lot of moving parts.
I know. I'm trying to go fast because my headphones are starting to die. So anyway, so I would like to hear what everybody else has to say, or we'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, just want to be clear. Well, that's the recommendation based on these 6 items that I have put forward on my side. I'd be open to other changes if they said that they could keep the full 48 of Council on Aging hours by reducing something else by 48. I guess I'd be okay with that because, as I said, my goal is to manage to a 4% budget, not to micromanage the select board on what makes up that 4% budget.
I guess I would say that I would like to give them the feedback on these 6 items, and they can do whatever they want.
I'm putting it out there so the select board member can hear my view on it, that it's not necessarily, it's a bottom line number for me that I'm most focused on at this moment.
Okay.
Excuse me, Craig, don't forget that the ambulance revolving fund is contributing 37,000 to this. And
Right.
also the town of Norfolk is contributing 44,000. So those 2 items need to be added back in. And
Right.
also the marijuana money needs to be factored in for this year's budget as well.
And I'm looking forward to figuring that out. So
Okay.
I'm with
All right.
there's some, yeah, I just want to look at it.
Could I just,
So-
Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jim.
in response, the board really has gone through a similar exercise that you just went through in terms of these items, trying to prioritize. So getting feedback from the finance committee on perhaps tweaking the priorities. I don't think you're finding any resistance from the select board, but I also agree with Craig that if we really believe that we need to fund one of these, I think the onus is on us to find it somewhere else in the next 38 hours.
Well,
I agree. Actually, I think what hasn't been said is no matter what, my opinion is that no matter what reductions are made, that those reductions they help with this situation with the enterprise fund, that if you reduce here, that's money that is not included in the reimbursement line for FY22 from the enterprise fund.
The enterprise fund.
Hold on 1 second, Carol.
Sorry.
Jim, you were muted.
Yeah, I can't speak for the board, but I think we're hearing the message. So I don't think we're taking it out of, for example, the DPW heavy equipment operator.
Yeah,
I think that one's hung
right.
free.
Right. And you're not doing it for the sake of having more free cash or something like that. Right.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy, one last comment to my former colleague, Mr. McCaffrey. You and I sat in many times about what marijuana could be used for, Jim. I encourage you that all the money that the executive office is requesting for increased staffing could definitely be supported. If not now, then when the marijuana money is available in the fall. Thank you.
I certainly agree with your position. And we can't wait for the money to come rolling in. And it's really frustrating to have it in our pocket but not be able to use it. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're right.
Carol,
Yes.
I cut you off earlier. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make the point that the indirect costs that are charged back to the enterprise funds are for the staff at the treasurer's office. You have the indirect cost there. So the only thing that would impact the indirect costs is removal of the executive office admin person. We'd have to adjust that down because that 22,000 is included in the total number.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. Actually, but the money that potentially could be taken out of the Council on Aging request could go back to direct dollars elsewhere. Correct?
It could go back if you take it out of Council on Aging.
Could go.
Fund the executive person. Not fund.
I'm saying that if the Council on Aging amount were reduced by say 50%, just in theory, 50%,
Yep.
then that $24,000 could get placed. It would go to fund the hours of somebody in the DPW on highway or transfer station to a cost center that it would not in FY22 need to be funded via a reimbursement from the enterprise fund, is what I'm saying.
Right, so what you would need is to fund an additional person in the DPW.
You don't need an additional person, you just need to fund them via general fund, not enterprise funds.
It's just an allocation.
Then, well, how it's currently being done is the budgets are prepared based on what's given to us by the DPW director. So I guess you'd reduce the FTE and enterprise fund.
Right.
So
Right, you would just have to balance it. You just have to balance it based on the data that you know, the best data that you have at the time. You would reduce the enterprise fund contribution for the particular FTE that may be out of balance right now.
It would mean moving an FTE over to the general fund.
It would mean putting a portion of it over to the general fund, yes.
I just want to caution you on that one because after Carl, part of his presentation was that when he looks at direct cost, which is the headcount allocation to the enterprise, it's not that far off. Where we have, what he was saying is where we have a mismatch is in the indirect cost.
I know, I hear what you're saying, but my point is that even if he moves that $71,000 from direct to indirect or indirect to direct, he's not going to erase the remaining $300,000 that's, you know, in his preliminary data is erroneous or not optimally allocated. There's still another $300,000 out there, and even if he gets another 2 to 3 years of data, you know, say he's only 75% accurate with 9 months, he's not going to erase again another say $250,000 with having 2 more years of data. So
yeah, I understand that, but it's not going to be by jiggering the FTEs in the department. It's going to have to come from the indirect cost line, which means some of the work that's being done, you know, by indirect costs at the town hall gets reallocated back to the general fund.
But it's not, that's not, when you look at Carl's presentation, when he did the budget line for the indirect costs, he used the FY21 budget line. When he used the actual expenses for indirect, he used the actual expenses from FY19. So if you were to actually place our actual FY19 expenses against the FY19 budget number, his actual, it shows that the general fund was short paid by $5,600 from the enterprise funds. So that's why it's in his financial modeling, he still needs to do some work, and that's what he is explaining to everybody, that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for us to come up with what is truly needs to happen. Now, as far as the FTE number, Mr. McKay was on this evening and he said that he has more than enough work for the number of staff that he has budgeted in the enterprise funds, but he's been diverting them to the general fund. So we would need to increase the headcount in the general fund and leave the enterprise FTEs the same as they are now in order to get the work done that needs to be accomplished. So
this is all a sausage making that happens, you know, well behind the scenes and out of purview of a committee that meets once a week.
Right.
But I'm confident that we can get closer to right by again adjusting the allocation of enterprise versus general fund in the small amount of $24,000. And if Carol or Mike or anybody else feels that the better way to do it is to adjust direct or indirect cost lines, so be it. But again, it's got to get us closer to having made budget adjustments in the first year to take a huge chunk of the elephant, so that we're not left having to do that in the next year or two.
Right, so that's why the increase of the one DPW heavy equipment operator is supposed to help with that. or
It
rebalance.
does help. It does help, but I feel like we have the ability to do more.
So I think that then my recommendation would be to add 2 DPW heavy equipment operators, and then you're eliminating your council on aging anyway. So it'll be that money is applied, which is pretty close to what you're looking for.
I think here's my recommended motion, that the finance committee vote to provide information to the select board that we would like to see the IT position funded in full, $35,600. The VSO officer funded $6,525.12. The executive office funded to $21,339.76, less any portion that can be funded out of HCA dollars. That the Council on Aging request be reduced by 50%, that the DPW position be fully funded to $51,851.60, and that the rec office request be funded to the amount of $11,920, and that any resulting reductions be used to rebalance the allocation between enterprise funding and general funding, to rebalance that and improve that situation, for lack of a better word. That's my recommended motion, and I'd like for somebody to either make that motion or modify it as they deem appropriate. And then, essentially that would kick the can back to the select board.
If that was a motion, Mr. Chair, I will second that.
So it's been so moved. It's not a motion, but it's
Okay.
So you've moved it. If you agree with what I just said, just need somebody else to second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to provide feedback as aforementioned to the select board with budget recommendations pertaining to Article 3. Discussion.
And Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Craig.
The piece that there's a couple items there that I don't agree with, but the one that I think is most important is if we can use HCA funding for the administrative position, and if that means waiting until November, I would rather fund that at 0 right now and pick it up in November, and use those funds, because we just don't have those available funds yet. If that's really something the select board thinks is feasible, if that's something that falls within the waiting a couple more months instead of funding it right now, I would say that's some money that can be pushed off till November.
Craig, I agree with you. And that's why I think we just leave it as is. And if that percent ends up being 100%, then so be it.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. And then just wait for the appropriate moment when we have HCA funding to actually fund the position. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense.
Mr. Chair, although it makes sense if I amend my motion to put that at 0 until November, and then the select board would have 100% of the necessary marijuana funds and not have to disturb anything that they've worked on thus far.
I just don't know if they want to wait 6 months to have the position, up the hours upped. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's not ideal, but again, I think if there's a feeling that the finance committee will support that in November to move that position up to full time, then I think that's the way to go. If we could initiate the added hours in November, then that would be great. we've waited 3 or 4 years. Another 6 months isn't going to break us.
Well,
Sorry to laugh.
From every department. It's the first time Mike
Mike,
said that.
I don't want you to wait. And I'm going to make the position that we just leave it as at the appropriate percentage. And then that discussion can be had with the select board, and perhaps you find other HCA funding requests right now that can be tailored so that you get that money now out of the existing HCA dollars.
We will take a look at it and get back to the committee if the committee's open to that.
My recommendation is we leave it as is, to reduce it via the percent deemed appropriate, and let the select board work that out. Kathy, you okay with that?
I would like Mr. McCaffrey's comments if he would feel that it would okay to increase the executive department in November at the 100%, Jim.
Ideally, we would not wait till November because we really have a clog in the workflow here. Now, if we could, if we could get the position, I guess that I would say that the board could take the position that's not binding, to say, look, halfway through the year, we're going to shift it from general fund to marijuana money to pay for it. But in the meantime, we have it. I know it's kind of a screwball way to do it, but.
I think the article is, the motion as currently stated gives you all the flexibility to do all of the above. It lets you look at existing HCA funding and to see if you can get the 10 grand now, and then get additional money later in the fall, or it allows you to fund it from general funds for until the fall, until you can get other HCA funding.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I think we can certainly take a look at the HCA funds and see if there's any way to rework those, to tailor those, to possibly make that work to get us to November. So we don't have to request any of these funds through the general fund now, but perhaps be able to squeeze those into the HCA funds to at least get us to the fall town meeting.
Okay.
Très bien.
Okay, so it's been moved,
My motion
seconded,
remains,
and
Mr. Chair.
thank you.
Does this
Any
mean we
further?
get $179,908.86?
I don't
Why
know.
is everyone laughing?
I'm trying to get the number here. The 30, well.
Because I'm
No,
taking
because the
half of
Council on Aging,
and
is
putting it
being,
but putting it toward general fund DPW.
well, that's the sausage making that we think ought to happen behind the scenes and not at this committee meeting.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just want to make sure. we get the
Because I do understand Carol's point. There's more details here that we're just not capable of, candidly capable of deciphering through when only 2 people have the spreadsheet in front of them right now, and it's 10:30 at night.
And Mr. Chair, to finalize, I'm surprised Jim McCaffrey, he knows how to make sausages, Jim. Come on.
Okay, so it's been moved, seconded. We've had enough discussion on it. I want to vote on the motion. So this is on the to provide feedback to the select board on Article 3. Pete, yay. Craig.
Okay.
Kathy.
Is that a yay? I'm a yay.
That was a yay, yeah.
Jody.
I'm abstaining because I don't understand the motion.
Right. Well,
Would you like it to be clarified, or so that you don't have to abstain?
That would be helpful. There was so much discussion, I got a little bit lost.
You fell asleep, but that's another way
I
of saying you
didn't,
fell asleep. Okay.
but
All right, so the motion is to communicate to the select board that we would recommend that they, on those above service level requests, there's 6 of them. There's one that says must fund, and then there's 5 more below it. That the above service level requests, that they fully fund the IT position, that they fully fund the VSO position, that the executive office position for 21,339.76 be fully funded less from the general fund, less any percentage that they're able to allocate via marijuana impact, host community impact funding. That they reduce the Council on Aging request by 50%, that they fully fund the DPW request, 51,000 and change, and that they fully fund the rec department position for nearly $12,000. And that all we're doing is voting to provide them that feedback, which would then allow them to modify the budget as they deem appropriate. And we would vote on it just prior to town meeting.
Okay. I
And,
understand.
and just to mention what my motion also included was that the $3,000 for the capital planning committee would be absorbed into the extra hours that I think Mr. Gazinski said that he could do for the time being.
Yes, I think certainly for the next year or two, that would be a workable model. We can make that work.
Thank you, Mike.
But that could not be done via HCA funding.
Correct.
All right.
So we already have 3,000 in the under the 4% cap.
Okay. All right.
So
Okay.
that's currently within.
All right. Jody,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
and forgive me, who did I forget? Because I know Joyce.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me. Okay. Mike, did I forget any?
I don't believe so. Actually, unless you wanted to comment or have any thoughts on the road maintenance, I guess you've already acted on that in the warrant. So no, I don't believe there's anything else.
Okay. I'm just trying to get back to my agenda because I'm so far. You guys are going to vote me out of chairmanship here next.
Are you waiting to vote on Article 5, 6, and 7?
Yes.
And
That's what I think. I just want to check with my more experienced colleagues. We're gonna defer Article 4, 5, 6, and 7, correct?
To recommend at town meeting.
Yep, recommend at town meeting.
Yeah, you voted on 4.
so Article 3 isn't going to be recommended at town meeting?
Yes, I think it's
It will
3,
be
5,
recommended at
6, 7. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to
3,
make
5,
sure.
6, and 7, right.
And I don't have my articles open. I just closed them. What is Article 4?
Article 4 is for the funding of the union contracts.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we approved that one, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so back to my agenda.
Old business, new business.
Old business, new business. We don't have any. Anybody have any new business that they want to bring up? And then finally, meeting minutes. Meeting minutes from April 7th. Can I get a motion, please?
I
Mr. Chair?
motion to accept the minutes from, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jody.
You go ahead. You already went down the road, so it's on you.
I motion to accept the last minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded to we vote to approve the meeting minutes from 7 April Finance Committee meeting. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? And Doug is an abstention. Deirdre.
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay. I think that concludes our meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much for everybody for persevering and getting through that. And I know it's difficult to defer some of these things, but I think we did the right thing. Next meeting is when, Deirdre?
Well, actually, I had a question. So the meeting, if you do plan on meeting next Wednesday, the agenda would have to be posted by tomorrow.
We will not meet next Wednesday.
So then the next meeting would be the public hearing, the pre-town meeting. Is that
Yep.
it? Okay.
Yep. again, I'm going to defer to some of the more experienced members on the committee, especially when it comes to schedule. Jody and Craig, any reason that we need to meet next week that we couldn't give, this would afford the committee, the select board to come up with any adjustments to the budget, and then we could meet at pre-town meeting to and potentially vote on these things, or just prior to town meeting, we could do it then as well.
I think it's really that budget discussion is the big variable.
Right.
Other
But
than
we can do
that,
we can have that at pre-town meeting,
we
correct?
can. Yep.
Yeah, I would lead with the budget discussion. So we go into pre-town meeting, and even people that tune in can watch that discussion, because
Sure.
get the information early in the week from the selectmen's opinion Monday. Well, not early. We get it Tuesday. Then we can look it over in one day and be ready to move in. And if it comes in close to the recommendations that we put in place, it shouldn't be a heated discussion. It should be pretty straightforward.
Okay. Okay. So that, I think that answers it. Did I hear somebody?
Yeah, it was me. So then would the committee like to meet prior to the scheduled hearing at 7 p.m. for the, yeah, I'm getting tired.
It worked at 7 a.m.
To have a discussion prior to the hearing that is scheduled and was posted, or
I don't
no?
think so. I think it's just going to be a standard meeting. It's just going to be a standard meeting, but we're going to have the pre-town meeting. We're going to go through all of the articles. There may be more discussion on Article 3, 5, 6, and 7 because we need to wrap it up and have our votes, but we won't necessarily have our votes on all those other ones. Is anybody opposed to that?
What we had done in past years is vote the outstanding articles prior to start pre-town meeting, start finance committee meeting at 7, vote the outstanding articles at 7, and then by 7:15 roll into pre-town meeting. That's been a way we've done it in the past. So we don't stop whatever flow there might be of pre-town meeting to have this discussion.
Okay, anybody, that's how we've done it in the past. Any reason that we can't just move into start with pre-town meeting right from the start and just go over these 4 articles in sequence with during pre-town meeting? I mean, what's the reason to not do that? It's really no different than what we're doing right now. We're having a public meeting right now. Anybody can attend. There may be more people in attendance. So what?
My opinion is that it's a little more council business in terms of making our recommendations and votes, and then we roll into pre-town meeting, which is more of a forum for residents to ask questions on each of the warrant articles.
Okay.
So we've tended to do it before we roll into pre-town meeting, so we can kind of do our council business ahead of time.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna defer to that. So Deirdre, we'll do it the same way we've done it. We'll have we'll have our meeting in advance to go over these at least 4 articles that I can remember of right now. Anything that we've deferred on as of right now, we'll go over those, and then we'll have start the pre-town meeting, say 30 minutes after that. So we'll start at 7 and then pre-town meeting at 7:30.
I scheduled 7:15 for pre-town meeting. If I've learned one thing from the select board and this meeting, schedules are meant to be closely
broken.
The only thing is that it was posted, it had to be posted 2 weeks prior, and it was posted in the Milford Daily News to start at 7 p.m. So that's why I was asking if the committee wanted to meet at 6:30.
Okay, that's fine, Deirdre. Yep, that's fine. So if everybody would please take note, those are substantial, important votes. 6:30.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'll take a motion. And I do want to say thank you to everybody again.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank
Aye.
you, everybody.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you
Pete.
all.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks, Deirdre.
everybody.
Thanks, good night.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.